Mom, I made sure everything was locked up tight. Of course, I didn't forget Dad's cherished shed either.
That's great. Shall we go on our trip then? We were supposed to go on a birthday trip for our daughter, the three of us, including my husband. However, he suddenly had to go on a business trip because of an urgent work matter he couldn't get out of, and just like that, he said we wouldn't be able to go on the trip. After sending off my husband, my daughter and I headed to the airport and flew to our destination. When we returned from the trip, my daughter wanted to give souvenirs to Grandma and Grandpa, so we went to my in-laws' house. The atmosphere there was incredibly tense, and my father-in-law was erupting like an active volcano, absolutely furious. It seems that a terrible accident had occurred while we were away on our trip, and the discoverers were none other than my in-laws. I'm a married woman in my mid-30s. I was assigned to the administrative department of the sales division at the company where I started working after graduating from college. Though I didn't go out on sales calls directly, there were times I had to go outside to assist with various tasks. One time, when I had to deliver some forgotten documents to a client, the person who helped me out was my future husband. Later, we ended up sharing a table at a crowded restaurant during lunchtime, which led us to start dating, and eventually, we got married. I was really enjoying my job at the time, so I proposed to keep working until I got pregnant, and my husband agreed, saying that the idea of a stay-at-home wife was outdated. After finding out I was pregnant, I kept my promise and quit my job to focus on our family and gave birth to our daughter. My romantic history hasn't always been smooth sailing. If anything, I've had experiences that made me timid about love or even left me with traumas. It was mostly from my high school days. I wasn't particularly popular, but I did date to some extent appropriate for my age. Mostly, I ended up in relationships where the other person confessed their feelings to me, but inevitably, they would find someone else they liked more and leave me. When asked why, they would simply say they found someone they liked more than me, which gradually made me more and more wary of love. During my university years, because of these traumas, I didn't participate in any mixers and mostly hung out with girlfriends. If a guy joined the group, I would feel uncomfortable and leave. As a working adult, I decided to keep it strictly professional with men, having coffee or lunch with them, but never considering them as romantic interests. Yet, my husband became a romantic interest, and our relationship led to marriage, which I consider nothing short of a miracle. He was the only one who confessed his feelings for me and didn't leave. My husband was both a good talker and a good listener, always managing to make me laugh. Life with him was lively, every day felt fresh and exciting, and I was truly happy. Then, one day, someone I knew moved nearby. That person was a friend I was very close to when I was in high school. Looking back, it might have been over something trivial, but at the time, it felt significant enough for us to have a falling out. What exactly led us to drift apart, I can't quite remember now. Since our falling out, I hadn't contacted her even once, only hearing about her through mutual friends at reunions. That's how I learned she had gotten married. When we accidentally met again, I was so stiff, not knowing the right way to act. But she approached me cheerfully, as if she had no memory of our quarrel. So, I blurted out, "Emmy?" Because that's what I used to call her. Emmy cheerfully said, "I got divorced." It seems she decided to start fresh and moved to an unfamiliar place. She brightly shared that she's now making a living through part-time jobs. Can you believe running into someone I know here? I'll be honest with you, I was really feeling scared and vulnerable. I'm not used to being alone. I remembered how Emmy always had people around her, always lively. So, I impulsively said, "We're neighbors now, come over anytime." Little did I know, this would lead to something else. Emmy quickly came over, saying she bought some trendy pastries to share with my family. At first, she came over when my husband wasn't home, during weekdays, but gradually, she started saying it was lonely to eat alone and began staying for dinner. Eventually, she got on well with my husband, and before I knew it, she was frequently visiting when my husband was home. Our house was always filled with conversation and laughter. Having Emmy around, and seeing how my husband was friendly towards my friend, I felt truly grateful. However, I started to notice that the closeness between my husband and Emmy was becoming unnatural. Even from a woman's perspective, Emmy is beautiful, and she has a way of talking to anyone without any barriers. In high school, she was adored by both upper and lower class men, and even teachers liked her. She was the kind of person who could befriend anyone. I don't think there is any ulterior motive, yet my husband blushed and acted all smitten around Emmy, sometimes touching her more than necessary. I can somewhat understand a man being charmed by Emmy's looks, but my husband has a wife and child right in front of him. What's with that behavior? My suspicion only grew. Emmy began visiting closer to the evening. Half the week, she was having dinner with my family as if it was a given. But I started making excuses, ensuring she left before my husband came home. Sometimes, I'd forcefully suggest, "How about we have lunch together," to get her out of the house. Initially, Emmy was okay with it, but gradually, she started asking, "Do you have a reason for not wanting me in your house?" And avoiding my husband became increasingly difficult. Despite not wanting my husband and her to get close, I found myself making up reasons to refuse her visits. Things changed after she started coming over. My husband has been into DIY since before we were married and always said he wanted his own shed in the backyard once we tied the knot. A shed wasn't feasible, so we settled for a large storage container that doubles as a workshop. He would spend almost all his days off locked away in there, immersed in his hobby. He brought in a big sofa to lounge on, but he never shooed me or our daughter away. In fact, he'd get passionate about his projects or work on them together with her. Our daughter enjoyed watching things come together so much that there were times she wouldn't leave his side. But recently, he's been chasing her away with a "stay out of the shed," looking furious, and locking himself in. Even when called for meals, he'd say, "Just eat without me," or leave my portion by the door and go away, reducing the time spent with family. He avoided meeting my or our daughter's eyes, and she began to be scared of him. When he was home, she'd hide in her room. I had no real need to go near the shed, so I avoided it, waiting for him to come out if I needed him. Just being around the shed would sour his mood dramatically. A month later, I realized I needed to start planning for our daughter's birthday celebration. We had been talking about taking a trip. We hadn't done much since she was born, partly because of my husband's work, and partly because we didn't want to disturb others with a too young child. Now that she's grown into a considerate and kind child, I was thinking of splurging on a longer stay than just one night. That meant I might need the large suitcase we used before we were married, so I headed to the shed. I tend to take good care of my belongings, so it would still be usable, despite not having checked it for years due to its storage. My husband had warned me to stay away from the shed, but he was at work today, so it should have been fine. However, as I approached, I heard strange noises coming from the supposedly empty shed. Could it be a burglar? I wondered, peeking through the small window to check, only to find my husband and Emmy in the midst of an intense affair. It felt disgusting, like being forced to watch a cheap adult movie. Of course, the shock that my husband and Emmy were in such a relationship hit me hard, but deep down, I wasn't entirely surprised by his behavior considering recent attitudes. I had naively thought that since Emmy was a close friend, she would reject any advances from my husband. The betrayal by Emmy shook me more profoundly than the distrust towards my husband. When I peeked, their affair seemed to be ending, and they lay side by side, naked, chatting and laughing as if nothing had happened.
She seems clueless, doesn't she?
Given her trauma with love, I'd say she's pretty dense. There were times they felt I was somewhat suspicious, but they laughed, thinking I hadn't realized the extent of their relationship. Emmy said the thrill of not knowing when I might find out was irresistible. However, my husband was a bit cowardly about letting her into the house while I was away, fearing it would be too obvious, so they switched to the shed. They even joked about how disappointed they were that I obediently stayed away from the shed, making it less thrilling since I hadn't caught on, and now they were getting bold.
Scare a girl with love trauma, and she won't come near, right? I want more thrill. How about sneaking out in the middle of a weekday night next time?
Emmy knew my husband and I slept in the same room and was daring him to sneak out without getting caught by me. From the day he warned me off the shed, they had been meeting there on weekends. Emmy, getting carried away, made a shocking revelation. That girl, despite her plain looks, seemed to appeal to guys in high school because she appeared meek. Apparently, Emmy was annoyed that I, being less flashy than her, received attention from male students. And yet, she'd put herself down so obliviously, it drove me nuts, so I took every boyfriend she had. I never belittled myself. What was so wrong about asking someone who professed to like me what exactly they liked about me? The boyfriends I had always cited my quietness, seriousness, and kindness as their reasons, which seemed generic. Still, I was happy they liked me, and I tried to get to know and like them in return. I always thought mutual affection at the time of confession was rare. Learning that Emmy saw me this way and had snatched boyfriends out of jealousy saddened me deeply. Emmy claimed she never actually dated any of the guys she took from me, it was just a game to her. And she'd laugh about how shocked the guys were when she dumped them. I remembered on graduation day, one of my exes apologized for hurting me. I had thought it meant he was sorry for changing his mind after confessing, but after hearing Emmy's story, it clicked that he was apologizing for falling for Emmy's seduction and hurting me. Because it made all the strange things that happened in high school suddenly make sense. While listening to Emmy's boasts, my husband said, "I'm sick of looking at such an ugly face. People say beauties bore you after 3 days, but that's a lie. Facing an ugly person every day is true torture." Anger surged through me, my fists clenching with rage. Bursting through the door and confronting them was one option. But I realized that wouldn't be enough to beat them. They were two, and I was alone. Without evidence, my words would mean nothing, and I would be the one to lose. I thought the best course of action was to carefully plan my revenge while keeping my anger in check. Regarding our daughter's birthday trip, my husband had said he'd leave all the planning to me and our daughter, not participating in any discussions. Moreover, he decided not to join us, citing an absolutely unavoidable work commitment on the day of our daughter's birthday, saying he couldn't take the day off. His insistence on the unavoidable work made me realize he was probably planning to meet up with Emmy. Children often notice more than adults think, and our daughter had realized that her father's moodiness wasn't just about him being irritable. She was scared and didn't want to be in the same space as him, so for her, the fact that he wouldn't be joining the family trip seemed like a blessing. She seemed relieved when I told her. Truth be told, I had no intention of giving up on the trip just because my husband couldn't come. In fact, I was relieved he had opted out. Considering how scared my daughter was of him, a trip without him seemed like the perfect change of scenery. Originally, we had planned a domestic trip assuming my husband would join, as he said he could only take a few days off. But with him not joining, an international trip, which was what our daughter had wanted, became possible. I changed our domestic trip to an international one and extended the duration, sharing this update only with my daughter. When I told her to keep it a secret from Dad, she said, "I wouldn't tell Dad." "I'm on your side, Mom." On the day of the trip, as we were heading to the airport by taxi, my daughter boasted, "I did well, didn't I?" saying she had locked up Dad's precious shed. The shed has a lock on the outside, but due to a small mistake by my husband, there are actually 2 keys for the outside. There's the original key that came with the container house and another key he installed on the outside by mistake, meant to keep our daughter from entering during dangerous work. He later added a lock that could only be locked from the inside, totaling 3 locks on the shed. The inside lock can only be operated from within. It wasn't summer yet, but the season could see significant temperature rises during the day. I figured they wouldn't dare use the shed for their secret meetings, especially without telling my husband about the lock situation, and boarded the plane. I remembered my husband once saying the shed felt like a sauna in the summer and wanted to install air conditioning. But I had refused, arguing that a fan and an open window were sufficient for a space only used on weekends. This decision would turn out to play into my plan for revenge. While staying at our travel destination, We received a cryptic message from my in-laws once. It seemed something unexpected had happened at home. But they insisted they'd handle it and told us to enjoy our trip with our daughter to the fullest. Of course, I intended to enjoy the trip with my daughter and had no plans to return early, even if there were issues at home. Because it meant my plan for revenge was unfolding successfully. After thoroughly enjoying the 2-week trip with my daughter, we returned home. Without delay, we went to my in-laws' house after dropping off our luggage, as my daughter wanted to give them souvenirs. I felt bad for using it as an excuse, but it served my purpose. At my in-laws' house, not only were my in-laws present, but my husband was there too, despite it being a time when he was supposed to be at work. He looked very haggard, with an unkempt beard that made him look more intimidating. Seeing him like this, my daughter recoiled and hid behind me. My in-laws immediately started apologizing profusely in front of me. Then my father-in-law began to explain what had happened while my daughter and I were on our trip. The atmosphere in the house was heavy, and seeing my daughter's near-tears face, my mother-in-law took her to another room to keep her company. Actually, I had arranged for my in-laws to use our home while we were away on our trip. After learning my husband wouldn't be joining the family trip, I heard from my in-laws about their plans for a minor renovation at their house. They wanted to do it during a period when they could use a grant, but were hesitant because the work would mean going without water for a while. Indeed, it wasn't summer, but the daytime temperatures could still be quite high, making the lack of water a significant inconvenience. So, I suggested they stay at our place. If we timed our departure with the start of their renovation, my husband would be at work during the day, and they could use the house without any awkwardness. They were very grateful for the suggestion, and plans moved forward. Later, when my husband said his unavoidable work had turned into a business trip, I told my in-laws they could stay over, as it wouldn't matter day or night. I suspected my husband was actually planning a trip with Emmy instead of going on a business trip. On the day, my daughter and I left the house just before noon. I had told my in-laws they were welcome to come over any time as we were leaving. The renovation was scheduled for the afternoon, and after greeting the contractors, they arrived around 2 p.m. Upon arrival, they discovered 2 people collapsed in the front yard. The shed door was also violently broken, indicating something serious had happened, leading to calls to the police and ambulance in a panic. Upon closer inspection, one of the collapsed individuals was my husband. The other was a woman, and for some reason, both were half naked. Both were semi-conscious, making communication difficult, leading my father-in-law to suspect heatstroke and call an ambulance. The relationship between the two was easy to guess, given they were found together in such a state. The commotion quickly became known to the neighbors, attracting onlookers. One neighbor began explaining how they heard loud noises and then saw a half-naked couple running out of the shed, noting the woman was not the wife, which made the relationship between the two widely known among those present. This wasn't part of my plan, but since my husband's actions became known throughout the neighborhood, I considered it a successful outcome. I'm grateful for my daughter's quick thinking. As I listened to my father-in-law, I put on an act of being shocked. When I was a child, concerned about my introverted nature, my mother had enrolled me in a children's theater group. Recalling the coaching from back then, I tried to act as naturally as possible, earning my father-in-law's sympathy as he harshly reprimanded my husband. I reassured my father-in-law that I was okay and then confessed that I had installed a camera in the shed. It was initially set up to catch evidence of my husband's affair, but I explained to my husband and in-laws that I installed it because I was scared of the strange noises coming from the shed, thinking they might be wild animals. I thought it was just animals, but who would have thought, my husband having an affair, right? I casually mentioned. As I said this and looked at my husband, he looked back at me with a look of "What have you done?" My father-in-law, sensing the urgency, pushed me to check the footage quickly. My mother-in-law offered to keep looking after our daughter, allowing us to rush back to our house. My husband was somewhat dragged along by my father-in-law, obviously reluctant since he didn't want the evidence of his deeds to be seen. That's because the evidence of the affair is still there, and he wouldn't want his father-in-law to see it. However, when we reached the shed, he began to throw a tantrum like a 3-year-old. My husband protested about privacy invasion and suddenly feeling dizzy, and when those excuses weren't accepted, he just yelled about it being irrelevant and that he didn't want this. I thought to myself, if you're doing something that you don't want seen or known, then you shouldn't do it in secret. He had enjoyed the thrill of possibly getting caught, so shouldn't he have been prepared for the possibility of getting caught? In the end, my husband couldn't stand against my father-in-law's force and had to enter the shed. My father-in-law has been practicing martial arts since he was young and still goes to the local dojo to teach kids. My physically inactive husband had no chance against him. The camera in the shed captured my husband sneaking back into the yard and into the shed after saying he was going on a business trip. The camera was discreetly installed not just inside the shed but also at the entrance to catch anyone unnoticed. Once inside, Emmy was already there waiting. It seems they had created a space in the hedge for one person to get through to the yard without me noticing, placing something in front of it that even a woman could move to deceive me. Waiting for my husband in the storage room, Emmy was already in her underwear and seemed eager to do it. My husband, perhaps lustful at the sight of her, jumped on Emmy like an animal and repeated the violent, constant action. There was a moment when their activity abruptly stopped, captured by the entrance camera, showing my daughter approaching the shed. Despite being engrossed in their actions, they seemed sensitive to any sounds. They could have waited for us to leave for their secret meeting, but choosing to meet while we were still home was part of the thrill they sought, I suppose. Once my daughter moved away from the shed area, they resumed. They probably hadn't considered that my daughter might lock the padlock from the outside. Later, the camera installed at the entrance recorded the sound of a taxi arriving and my voice calling to my daughter, "Let's go," clearly audible. This must have reached the ears of the two inside because, as the taxi drove away, the camera inside the shed captured them stopping their intimate actions and attempting to leave the shed. However, footage showed my husband's confusion as the door wouldn't open, and Emmy peering out through the small window, trying to figure out the door's situation. Even the slim Emmy seemed to struggle to exit through the small window because her shoulders got in the way. Unable to determine the door's condition and growing increasingly frustrated, my husband's tone became aggressive. "If that's the case, you can just dislocate your joints and squeeze through that small window. You're a man, act like it." "What? Wanting to feel the thrill and hiding before my wife leaves was your idea, not mine. I wouldn't be in this mess if I hadn't gone along with your thrill-seeking." The bickering that ensued between them, now far from their earlier affectionate behavior, had me struggling to hold back laughter. Trapped in the sealed shed, the temperature inside was rising rapidly. Unable to find a way out and without a key, the pair were sweating profusely, resembling people stuck in a sauna. Dehydrated from sweating, their risk of heatstroke skyrocketed, seemingly leading to the condition's onset. Both my husband and Emmy must have had their phones on them. They could have just called for emergency services while dressed, I thought. It seems people's judgment falters when they engage in guilty pleasures. My father-in-law seemed to have expected something like this, but facing the reality was different from just suspecting it. My husband, already facing a stern rebuke from my father-in-law, could only shrink smaller under his fiery wrath. I became so concerned that my father-in-law might collapse from his excessive anger that I found myself worrying more about him than the situation at hand. I was so busy trying to suppress my laughter that my body shook. My father-in-law mistook me for breaking down in tears. Using that to my advantage, I made it look like I was crying and said I couldn't go on. I wanted a divorce. While emotional wounds can't be healed with money, I expressed my desire for compensation in the form of alimony, to which my father-in-law strongly agreed, saying it was the right decision. He promised to make my husband pay alimony, and forced him, who hadn't uttered a single apology, to see my eyes and say sorry. My father-in-law also said he'd make my husband pay for a new place to live, reasoning that I wouldn't want to stay in a house tainted by infidelity. My husband started to object, saying, "Why should I?" but wilted under my father-in-law's gaze, sharper than any gang's, and meekly agreed to comply. Having been strictly disciplined by my father-in-law, a former athlete, since he was young, my husband has a tendency to follow his words, possibly out of trauma. Thanks to this, under my father-in-law's direction, everything went smoothly. After checking the camera and gathering my belongings, we returned to my in-laws' house, and then I moved to a hotel with my daughter. We decided to stay there until we found a new place, with my father-in-law insisting on my husband covering the costs. We opted for a rental apartment instead of a house, choosing a new building that was about to be completed and moving in as soon as it was ready. Right before we were set to move in, I received a call from Emmy. I could guess the gist of what Emmy wanted, but decided to answer to avoid any further complications.
Don't you dare contact my ex-husband, you ugly thing.
Her true nature seemed to reveal itself through her vile language and classless shouting, further criticizing me in a shrill voice, telling me not to show off my happiness just because I'm plain, or saying I don't know how to please a man. It's audacious. Speaking of which, there was a conversation between my husband and Emmy on the camera where my husband criticized our intimate life, saying, "She just lies there like a decoration, so boring." Probably, my husband often complained that our marital life was dull.
Because I thought your ex-husband was making a valid point.
In fact, before I suspected the affair between Emmy and my husband, I received a call from someone claiming to be Emmy's ex-husband. He told me Emmy had vanished without paying alimony or child support. The message was about expanding Emmy's social circle to investigate her whereabouts. It seemed someone suggested to him that I might know Emmy's whereabouts. When I received the call, Emmy had told me she was fleeing from an abusive ex, so thinking she was still being pursued post-divorce, I said I didn't know anything. But after learning the truth about Emmy and my husband, and her past betrayals, I asked a mutual friend about the real reason for Emmy's divorce. The friend didn't know the true reason, but they shared rumors that were completely different from what Emmy had told me. I then contacted the person who claimed to be Emmy's ex-husband, and heard a story very similar to the rumors. Emmy apparently had a child but showed no interest in parenting, always leaving the child with her ex-husband. She neglected child-rearing and household duties, indulging in flashy affairs. When her ex-husband reached his limit and initiated a divorce, Emmy left the child with him and disappeared. Though she agreed to pay alimony and child support at the time of the divorce, she never did. She vanished as if fleeing in the night, and he had been searching for her since. The child's photo he showed me looked exactly like Emmy as a child. I had known Emmy since elementary school, but we lost touch when she moved due to her father's job, only to reconnect in high school. Believing her ex-husband's story, I informed him of Emmy's location, and I told him everything she was doing to my husband.
Valid point? Ridiculous. I've always hated how you play the good girl. It's disgusting.
No matter what Emmy said, I ignored it. Engaging emotionally with someone like her was a waste. Even spending time on her felt like a waste. I told Emmy I would also demand compensation from her, which left her momentarily speechless. When I mentioned knowing everything she did in high school, she excused it as just a game and that the men misunderstood on their own. Emmy might see it as just a game, but among those caught up in her game, there were people who got hurt. At least, that was true for me and the ex-boyfriend who apologized to me. I told her we would communicate through lawyers in the future and hung up. Afterward, my husband returned to work, only to learn a hard lesson about not being arrogant. It seems he had a habit of looking down on those he considered beneath him. You know, the type who has one face for home and another for work. My husband was the textbook example, especially cruel to subordinates he deemed useless. One of these subordinates had coincidentally moved into our neighborhood and was among the onlookers when my husband was taken away half-naked by the ambulance. Even more, he had recorded it on his smartphone and spread it as payback for how he was treated at work. With the solidarity of other similarly mistreated subordinates, the spread of this video was incredibly fast, and naturally, the news of the affair became widely known. Feeling uncomfortable at work, my husband resigned, but due to his short tenure, his severance pay was minimal. He tried to seek refuge with my in-laws but was ignored and not even allowed inside their house. His attempts at finding a new job failed as it turned out he was all talk and no action, unable to secure employment. The relentless demands for child support and alimony meant he had to juggle multiple part-time jobs. I heard he's now in a position where he's being told he's less useful than a student part-timer, the very words he used to say to his subordinates. As a result, he keeps hopping from one job to another, unable to hold down a steady position. Since they can't accumulate a substantial amount of money, it seems they have no choice but to work without any days off. Emmy was taken back by her ex-husband and is now under strict surveillance by him and his family. She was dumped into a company known to her ex-husband, notorious for its harsh working conditions. It's a job that needs doing, but due to its danger and unpopularity, it pays well. Given that few people manage to stay long, it must be an environment more challenging than one can imagine. It seems Emmy is being reformed as a person, returning exhausted to the company dormitory every day without the spare energy to engage in affairs or snatch anyone's boyfriend. By the time payday arrives, her ex-husband has already deducted alimony and child support. In the end, they are left with an amount even lower than what a student part-time job would pay. Since she lives in a company dormitory, rent and utilities are deducted up front. Considering only food expenses are out of pocket, her ex-husband remarked that she should manage, informing me of Emmy's current situation. A few days later, I was notified that Emmy had attempted to escape due to the harsh conditions. But her movements were constantly monitored, and she was quickly found and brought back, receiving a severe reprimand that seemingly broke her spirit. Since then, there's been no sign of her trying to escape, and I've heard she's become quite submissive. My daughter and I have started a new life in our new home. Separated from my husband and knowing she wouldn't have to meet him unless she wanted to, my daughter has gradually returned to her cheerful self, stabilizing emotionally after the turmoil caused by my husband's behavior. Actually, I've always enjoyed obtaining certifications, and during my college years and even after getting married, I acquired several through distance learning. One of them has been particularly useful in job transitions. Though I became a stay-at-home mom after getting married and giving birth, I worked from home as much as I could. Now, I've decided to work full-time at an office. I might make my daughter feel a bit lonely, but I believe she'll understand. From now on, it's just the two of us, side by side, living a happy life, I told her. My daughter confidently replied, "I'll protect Mommy." It seems this ordeal has taught my daughter something profound. I've vowed to live each day to the fullest to protect my daughter's smile. I've got something important to talk about. What? Oh, you did say you had a lot to talk about when you got back, didn't you? Yeah. I want a divorce. What? Why all of a sudden? This is too sudden and too one-sided, isn't it? While undergoing treatment for cervical cancer, my husband suddenly demanded a divorce. I was completely panicked, not understanding the reason for the divorce at all. He did explain the reason for the divorce to try and clear up my confusion, but it was an utterly unreasonable one. It's because I've found someone I love more than you, understand? It seems he plans to leave me for a 19-year-old woman. I don't mind if we get divorced. But divorce isn't like a romance, where you can just say goodbye and that's that. I understand what you're thinking. But you can't just decide on a divorce right now, can you? Let's talk this through. Why? No matter how much we talk, my feelings won't change. Just give up and let's get a divorce. It's not about that. If the love is gone, we can't stay married, can we? I won't do anything. He started to act out, thinking he was some kind of hero, protecting the woman he loves. I was already irritated at being presented with a divorce for such an unreasonable reason, but being talked to as if I were some monster obstructing his love path only made me more irritated. I'm sure if he says one more irritating thing, I won't be able to hold back. You know you're at a higher risk of early childbirth and miscarriage after the surgery for cervical cancer, right? That's basically the same as being infertile. No value in a woman who's infertile. I'm gonna remarry a cute 19-year-old. He stepped on a massive landmine. These were words that should never be said, not here, not anywhere. I'll pack my bags. I decided to not have any discussions and leave the house. At that moment, if he had calmed down even a little and tried to stop me, he wouldn't have ended up regretting it so much. 3 days after I left the house, I was called to the hospital because there was something about my husband. Since the divorce hadn't been finalized, I reluctantly headed to the hospital. When I arrived, there he was, sitting in a chair, frozen, his face pale as a ghost. "I'm glad you could come right away. What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Yes. Your husband, actually." He collapsed to his knees. It seems a massive divine punishment had come down on him. "My name is Michelle. I'm a 27-year-old office worker. I married Kyle last year, and it's almost been a year since we got married. Kyle works at a supermarket as an employee, taking care of the produce section. We met 3 years ago, at his workplace, but my first impression of him wasn't very good. What should I make for dinner tonight? I'm too tired to think. Maybe I'll just buy some cheap vegetables and make a stir-fry like usual." Exhausted from work, I decided on the dinner menu in my head. Being familiar with the supermarket, I knew exactly where everything was. I headed straight for the stable and cheap vegetables. On the way, I noticed that cabbage was on sale, which stopped me in my tracks. I can't finish it by myself, though. "It's a good deal, isn't it? The price goes back tomorrow, so you'd better buy it now. It is good for your skin because it has vitamin C, and it's also good for your bones because it contains vitamin K and calcium." "Oh, yes. Thank you." I wasn't expecting to be approached by a store employee, so when Kyle suddenly spoke to me from behind, I jumped. Turning around, he continued to extol the virtues of cabbage to me, ignoring my bewildered expression, like he was a sales clerk in a clothing store. Not knowing how to respond, I nodded politely, put a head of cabbage in my cart, and walked away. After that day, whenever Kyle saw me in the store, he would always recommend vegetables to me. Eventually, he started talking about things other than vegetables, like his job and his life, and began asking about mine, eventually inviting me out for a meal. Essentially, Kyle was hitting on me. The idea of being hit on by a man who was hitting on a customer during work hours left a bad impression on me. However, he kept inviting me out, so on a whim, I decided to go out to eat with him once. I thought my husband was a bit frivolous for hitting on me, but when we went out to eat, he was surprisingly kind and sincere. My impression of him changed drastically, and I started to become interested in him, which led to us dating. After we started dating, I asked him why he approached me. A few weeks after I started working at the supermarket, I saw Michelle for the first time and it was love at first sight. I decided then that I had to talk to her the next time I saw her. You can't just do nothing when you fall for someone, even if it's a customer, right? Turns out, Kyle wasn't frivolous, he was passionate about love, the kind of guy who gets tunnel vision when he likes someone. After 2 years of dating, we got married last year. We've been married for a year now, so we were thinking it might be time to start trying for kids. Then, a significant event occurred. One day, I was in agony in the bathroom. At first, I thought it was just my regular period, but the amount was abnormally heavy. I also started bleeding at times other than my period, and there was blood in my urine. You've been feeling sick a lot lately, haven't you? Are you okay? I think I'm okay, but maybe you're lacking iron. Why don't you try eating more spinach and prunes? I think nutrition is important, but it's not just that. Maybe I should get checked out at the hospital. It still hurts. When I came out of the bathroom, Kyle looked worried and spoke to me. However, my stomach started hurting again soon after, and I had to retreat back to the bathroom. Lately, this has been happening a lot. Feeling that something was definitely wrong, I decided to go to the hospital for a checkup. Some people believe they'll never get seriously ill. I was one of those people. And often, it's exactly those people who suddenly find themselves with a serious illness. I became one of those people. You have cervical cancer. Me? But I'm still young. Cancer? Cervical cancer is actually more common in younger women, starting in their late 20s. Hearing I had cancer at the age of 27, I was disheartened, feeling as if my energy was drained and my back started to hunch like an old woman's. However, the doctor gave me some hopeful news, and by the time I left the examination room, I was standing a bit straighter. But the thought of having to tell Kyle weighed heavily on me, and by the time I got home, my back was hunched over again like an old woman's. The night I found out I had cervical cancer, I was nervously eating dinner, thinking about how to tell Kyle. Trying to find the right moment, I couldn't taste my dinner and spoke less than usual. Sensing something was different, Kyle put down his bowl and chopsticks and asked me, "You went to get your test results from the hospital today, right? How did it go?" At Kyle's question, my heart felt as if it had been punched. I put down my bowl and chopsticks and braced myself. "I have cervical cancer."
Cancer? But you're so young.
Cervical cancer can occur in younger people too.
I don't know much about cancer, but can't they just remove it with surgery? If they remove the uterus, does that mean you can't have kids anymore?
Don't worry. That's not the case. Surgery is needed, but the disease hasn't progressed too far, so they don't need to remove the whole uterus. So, even though it's cancer, treatment is possible, and I can still get pregnant. Really? That's a relief. The illness is tough, but it's a saving grace that treatment and pregnancy are possible. Hearing my words, Kyle picked up his bowl and chopsticks again, reassured. And seeing his expression, I also felt relieved and continued explaining while holding my bowl and chopsticks. Cervical cancer occurs near the entrance of the uterus, and the surgery involves cutting out a cone-shaped piece of the cervix with a laser scalpel. So, the shape will change after the surgery. Because of the change in shape, there's an increased risk of preterm birth and miscarriage. But don't worry too much. The risk increases, but it doesn't become extremely high.
Hey, we're eating. Even if it's important, can we not talk about surgeries and miscarriages right now? It makes it hard to eat.
Oh, sorry. Relieved by Kyle's reaction, I cheerfully continued explaining, which made him pause his meal again. I decided to continue eating quietly, but the tension was no longer present on my face. The following week, I was admitted to the hospital for surgery. It was supposed to take about 2 to 3 weeks, but that was just an estimate. Depending on the situation, I could be discharged earlier or it might take about a month. Thinking I might be hospitalized for about a month, I naturally worried about Kyle's well-being as his wife. Make sure you eat properly. Don't fall into an unbalanced diet, okay? I always eat with balance in mind. It's you who doesn't eat vegetables, right? Make sure to wake up on time in the morning and not be late for work. I'm the one who gets up earlier since my work starts sooner. You're the one who ends up being late even when I try to wake you up. No matter what I worried about, it always seemed to come back like a boomerang. It appears there's no need to worry about Kyle being on his own. Once hospitalized, I felt anxious about undergoing major surgery for the first time, and I couldn't sleep at all on the first night. The next day, sensing my anxiety, Kyle visited me and avoided talking about the illness or surgery. Right now, we're getting a lot of new student workers. A college guy started to produce, and 3 students joined the cashier team. Oh? Was one of them a freelancer? I hardly go over to the registers, so I forgot. Maybe I'll check next time. Weren't you saying the young workers tend to quit soon? Hopefully, they stick around this time. That's more of an issue with the meat section. The work there is tough, so I guess it can't be helped. I've never felt so grateful for such ordinary conversations. Talking to Kyle made me feel as if I were at home, and it helped to calm my nerves. However, on the day of the surgery, I felt overwhelmingly anxious. The nurse tried to calm my nerves with kind words, but as the time for the surgery approached, I gradually couldn't understand what she was saying due to anxiety and tension. By the time I was headed to the operating room, I started feeling so scared that I wanted to run away. But after entering the operating room and some time had passed, I realized the surgery was already over. About 6 hours had passed, but all I had were vague memories. The surgery, which I was so scared of, was over before I knew it, thanks to the general anesthesia. It was somewhat anticlimactic. Now that the surgery was over and I felt relieved, I was somewhat excited about how I would share this first surgery experience with Kyle. However, Kyle didn't visit the hospital on the day of the surgery or the day after. There was no response to my messages either. Why wouldn't he at least send a message? 5 days after the surgery, just as I was starting to feel annoyed, Kyle finally visited the hospital.
How are you feeling? Wow, you look much better than I thought. How long do you think it's been since the surgery? You didn't reply to any of my messages.
I'm alone at home now, so I have to take care of everything while working, you know? I planned to contact you, but I always end up falling asleep.
Well, that's okay. It looks like I'm recovering smoothly, and it doesn't seem like I'll be hospitalized for a month. That's good to hear. Are you getting enough nutrition? After surgery, your body is weak, so you should eat soft leafy vegetables like Napa cabbage or cabbage, which are high in water content. Make sure to eat them. I eat what's given to me at the hospital, so there's not much choice there.
I had planned to express all my dissatisfaction about Kyle not visiting the hospital, but his words reminded me of the inconvenience I was causing him, and I couldn't bring myself to say anything harsh. While Kyle is capable of living on his own, that doesn't mean it's not a burden. I felt a strong desire to be discharged as soon as possible. However, after that visit, Kyle stopped coming to see me again. Even when I contacted him, there was still no reply, as usual. I understand that work and household chores can be overwhelming, but over a week passed without any response from Kyle.
How are you feeling? Is discharge still a ways off? Wait a minute. I get that work is busy and household chores are tough, but over a week without any word is too much, isn't it?
No, I've been feeling off myself.
Where? You look perfectly fine to me.
It's not that I feel sick or anything. Kyle started fidgeting as if he was holding back from going to the bathroom, his hands covering his lower half. He seemed uncomfortable, but I was curious about what he meant by feeling off, so I asked directly.
Why are you holding yourself like that? Did something happen?
Well, I've got something like a rash down there.
You what? That sounds like...
I couldn't help but suspect that he might have caught a disease from somewhere, and my gaze towards Kyle became suspicious. He immediately understood what I was thinking and started making excuses.
Don't get the wrong idea. It's not like that. Guys can get rashes from sweat and chafing. I just didn't want to say anything because it's embarrassing and I didn't want you to think I'm dirty. Really? You haven't been doing anything you shouldn't have, right? Of course not.
It's hard to imagine he'd start an affair while his wife was in the hospital undergoing surgery. Believing in Kyle's words, I decided to trust him.
I'll trust what you're saying, Kyle, but just to be safe, you should get it checked out at the hospital.
It's fine. It's just skin down there, right? If I improve my protein metabolism with vitamin B6, the rash should disappear. I'll just eat some bananas and stay quiet.
No, you need to see a doctor.
No way. It's embarrassing to have that area examined. Kyle started fidgeting again, possibly due to itching, his hand moving around his lower half. While I think he should see a doctor, I don't know much about men's issues down there. If Kyle says it's okay, then it must be okay. Not wanting to talk about such matters in the hospital, I decided not to bring up the topic anymore. Another week passed. Still no word from Kyle, and the next time he came to the hospital was just before I was discharged. Hey, I've come to pick you up. Oh, are you the doctor? My wife has been in your care. As I was receiving instructions for aftercare from the doctor, Kyle arrived. Since he hadn't visited me at all, I saw it as a good opportunity for payback.
Doctor, listen to this. My husband has developed a rash down there and refuses to see a doctor because he's embarrassed. He thinks he can cure it by eating vegetables.
Hey, we don't need to talk about that right now.
A rash? That does sound concerning. What does it look like?
At first, it was like prickly heat, but lately, it's gotten worse, kind of bumpy, almost like cauliflower, I guess.
That's something that should be checked out immediately. See, the doctor says you should get it checked out right now.
Today's the day my wife is being discharged, and we have a lot to discuss at home. I'll get it checked tomorrow or sometime after.
Make sure you do. It's important to get it checked out soon.
Now that the doctor had insisted, Kyle had no choice but to go to the hospital, no matter how embarrassing or reluctant he was. Though I felt a bit embarrassed discussing Kyle's issue with the doctor, the embarrassment was surely greater for him. Serves him right. Feeling somewhat lighter, I left the hospital with Kyle. Though I had been hospitalized for only about 3 weeks, it felt like I hadn't been home in much longer. Excited to be back, I energetically plopped down on the living room sofa, my usual spot. Instead of sitting next to me, Kyle sat across the table, facing me.
Michelle, there's something important I need to talk about. What? Oh, you did say you had a lot to talk about when you got back, didn't you?
Yeah.
I want a divorce.
What? Why all of a sudden? After the surgery and being discharged, still needing treatment, Kyle dropped a bombshell I hadn't anticipated. I was so stunned by his words that I became speechless, my mind a whirlwind of confusion. Kyle continued to explain, trying to clear up my confusion.
Remember I mentioned a new cashier started? I've fallen for her. It happened while you were hospitalized, so I decided to tell you once you were discharged. I thought it might affect your recovery if you were stressed.
No, isn't this too sudden and too one-sided? It's not like I did anything wrong, right?
Yeah, that's right. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just that I've found someone I love more than you. Please understand.
Hearing Kyle's words made my head spin. I knew Kyle's love was passionate and intense, focusing solely on the person he loves without seeing anything else around him. But I never thought that this kind of love would continue after marriage, leading him to pursue someone new straight away.
The new cashier started around the time I was hospitalized, right? So, you were having an affair with her? That's why you never visited me at the hospital. Did you catch your illness from her? Don't get it wrong. Indeed, I didn't go to the hospital because I fell for her. But we haven't started dating yet. We decided to wait until I had broken up with you properly. So, there's been nothing physical between us.
Kyle looked at me with clear, earnest eyes. He probably wasn't lying, and wanting to date someone he likes after breaking up with me does seem fair. However, it's overwhelmingly unreasonable. Kyle is romanticizing his actions through a filter of passion, but it boils down to him wanting to switch to someone he deems better than me.
What's the name of this person you've fallen for?
Kelly.
She's a student, right?
How old is she?
19. Is she your type? I didn't fall for her because of her face, but I think she's pretty.
So, it was as I thought. Men's thoughts are simple. Younger and prettier is better. Even so, looking at passionate and straightforward traits from a distance, they seem so disheartening. I feel embarrassed now for having been pleased with Kyle's passionate love. I'm okay with divorcing a husband who justifies his shady actions with passionate love. But divorce isn't as simple as saying goodbye like in a romance. There's a lot we need to discuss.
I understand your point, but you can't just decide on a divorce right now, can you? Let's talk about it.
Why?
No matter how much we talk, my feelings won't change. Just give up and let's get a divorce.
It's not about that. Divorce isn't something you can just do on a whim, right?
If the love is gone, we can't stay married, can we? You're not planning to do something to Kelly, are you?
I won't do anything.
Well, maybe she'll have to be involved in our discussions. So, you were gathering information about her, planning to harm her, by asking her name and age.
Kyle's eyes remained clear and sincere. He must think he's some kind of hero, protecting the one he loves. Being proposed a divorce for such an unreasonable reason already irritated me, but being treated as if I'm some monster in his path of love made me even more furious. If he says one more thing to irritate me, I'm sure I won't be able to hold back.
You know you're at a higher risk of early childbirth and miscarriage after your surgery for cervical cancer, right? That's basically the same as being infertile. No value in a woman who's infertile. I'm gonna remarry a cute 19-year-old. Kelly won't have any problem having kids.
Kyle stepped on a massive landmine. These were words that should never be said, not here, not anywhere.
I'll pack my bags.
I decided not to have any discussions and leave the house. If only Kyle had become a bit more rational and stopped feeling like a hero, he wouldn't have ended up regretting so much. 3 days after I left the house, the divorce was still a work in progress, but preparations were moving forward. It seemed like the divorce would be finalized smoothly. That was the plan, until a call from the hospital changed everything. I thought the call was about my health, but they wanted me to come to the hospital immediately because there was something about Kyle. The hospital wasn't aware of our ongoing divorce proceedings. Since I didn't answer calls at home, they must have called my cell phone. I thought about ignoring it, but since we were still technically married, I felt obligated to go to the hospital. Reluctantly, I decided to head to the hospital.
Good, you came quickly. What happened? Is something wrong?
When I arrived at the hospital, Kyle was sitting in a chair, frozen, his face pale as a ghost. Having been in a similar situation at the hospital myself, I somewhat understood. This usually means the discovery of a serious illness.
Does Kyle have a serious illness? Yes. He had abnormalities in his lower body, and upon examination, it appears to be penile cancer. Cancer?
My gaze shifted from the doctor back to Kyle. He must have heard it before, but hearing the word cancer again from the doctor's mouth seemed to make his body tense up even more.
Is penile cancer like cervical cancer more common in younger people? No, it's more common in older individuals, over 60. It's quite rare compared to other cancers, as rare as becoming a millionaire at a casino. The chance of getting it at a young age is extremely low, like being struck by lightning in the middle of a city full of tall buildings. Is that so?
Knowing Kyle had drawn such an unlucky lot, I couldn't help but let a smile slip despite understanding it wasn't a laughing matter.
So rare to get such a cancer. What causes it? It's hard to say definitively, but human papillomavirus is a common cause. Yes, it's the same as cervical cancer. So, did I give cancer to Kyle? That's not necessarily the case. It can be transmitted through sexual activity, but it's also possible for men to contract it. So, it might have been transmitted from your husband to you, or both of you might have already been infected. Normally, the immune system handles it without issue, but in some cases, it can lead to cancer. Is Kyle's cancer treatable? Yes, similar to your cervical cancer, it can be treated with surgical removal.
That means... I looked at Kyle's face again, and my smile widened. He hadn't noticed me laughing at him before, but this time he caught me.
What are you laughing at?
Sorry, I just couldn't help it.
Doctor, does removal mean the whole thing? No, considering the progression, it will be a partial removal. What does that mean for having children? There won't be any issues with having children. However, there might be a decrease in reproductive function, and we'll try our best, but the shape might change. Doctor, just go ahead and remove it all. What's wrong with you? Why have you been like this?
Kyle, perhaps irritated, tried to stand up and confront me. But his legs gave out due to the shock, and he collapsed to his knees. Despite this, his anger and frustration didn't subside, and he continued to yell at me while looking up from the ground. The doctor, unaware of our plans to divorce, looked perplexed at our exchange. He watched silently as I laughed, holding my stomach, and Kyle, yelling at me. Kyle had planned to leave me for a young and pretty 19-year-old. He must have been looking forward to it. Now, for his pleasure, he has encountered trouble in the most crucial part. He pointed out the increased risk of early childbirth and miscarriage due to my surgery for cervical cancer, but now Kyle also faces risks to his reproductive function.
Doctor, we're getting divorced, so there's no need to contact me about my husband's illness.
Well then, you take care now. Make sure you listen to the doctor and take your treatment seriously. I left the hospital feeling amused by the story I had heard. All that's left is to finalize the divorce as quickly as possible. However, the illness caused a bit of a stir in our divorce proceedings. A week after learning about Kyle's illness, my phone rang again. It was Kyle, so I thought it was about the divorce, but it turned out to be something else.
Please! Let's pretend the divorce talk never happened. Why all of a sudden?
We've come this far, why now?
When I told her about my illness, Kelly dumped me.
Seriously? My smile widened again. But this time, since it was over the phone, I didn't have to worry about being yelled at for laughing. I had somewhat anticipated this outcome. Kyle tends to go off the rails when it comes to love, and a 19-year-old's love can be impulsive. That's probably why their gears meshed so well together. However, after hearing about Kyle's illness, this Kelly seemed to have regained her composure. It was much like when I was freed from the spell of Kyle's love for an unreasonable reason. At 19, the choices are plentiful, so it was probably easier for her to break free from the spell than it was for me. Having regained her composure, Kelly, like me, appears to have easily discarded Kyle.
With this kind of genital illness, no one will marry you. We're not divorced yet. Can't we start over, go back to square one? We're both people with the same concerns about having children, right? Let's support each other and live together going forward.
So, you just want any young and pretty girl, huh?
Don't say that. Work is tough. Everyone at the store knows about our divorce talks and me dating Kelly. If I'm dumped by both you and Kelly, I'd be too embarrassed to keep working.
I don't care about that. Why don't you just find another job then? And don't call me anymore unless it's about the divorce.
Wait! Don't be so cold. Please reconsider.
I thought it was a pointless call and hung up, ignoring Kyle's pleading words. It's about time to go shopping for dinner. I decided to head to a supermarket that wasn't the one where Kyle works. Afterward, our divorce was finalized. Kelly, who had been dating my ex-husband, dumped him and quit her cashier job at the supermarket. I have no idea where she went. She's probably erased the incident with my ex-husband from her mind and is living her usual life somewhere else. However, unlike a student who can easily reset their environment, my ex-husband doesn't have that luxury. For now, he seems to be continuing to work as a supermarket employee. But, since Kelly apparently spilled everything to everyone around, my ex-husband seems to be working under the scrutiny and gossip of his coworkers. I imagine he'll find the environment too uncomfortable and will probably change jobs eventually. Also, since Kelly was just a girlfriend, a simple goodbye was all it took to end things with her. However, with my ex-husband and me, it was a divorce. Divorces require explaining the reasons to family members. I told my ex-husband's parents everything about why we divorced without holding anything back. Naturally, his parents were furious. The news spread to relatives, and it seems he's feeling out of place not just at work but among family members as well. As a result, my ex-husband has become completely isolated. He will soon start treatment for his illness. Fighting an illness alone must be hard, but it's his own doing, so I hope he manages on his own. I've returned to work after my surgery and am recovering well. I'm still 27, so I'm hopeful for a good encounter in the future. Until then, I plan to focus on my work. Oh, come on. You're calling this a financial support? It's hilarious that it's just this little. Given Tom's earnings, there should definitely be more room for generosity, but Yvonne is just too polite to say anything. I see. It's indeed strange that the allowance Yvonne gives me is only $20 a month. In fact, I was later told by Yvonne herself that the amount she was supposed to send me was $2,600 a month. What happened to the difference, I wonder? But that's not all. Shockingly, amounts of money that I don't recognize have been withdrawn from my cash card. However, I have a good guess who might be behind this. I regret trusting her even a little and giving her my cash card. But when I think about Yvonne, I don't want to cause a fuss. Just as I was thinking this, Yvonne and Tom started to take action. And then, I confronted her about why she has been harassing me for so long. I'm Nora Kirk, a 60-year-old cook working in hospital food service. I had a daughter with my husband, whom I met in high school, but he passed away when our daughter was 2 years old. Overwhelmed with grief, it took me a while to recover. But I have my dear daughter Yvonne, so I couldn't stay down forever. Thinking this, I worked hard to make sure Yvonne wouldn't have to suffer. It's been over 30 years since my husband passed away. Yvonne is now working nobly as a nurse. I was worried about Yvonne, who is over 30 and not married yet, but she told me she couldn't be happy leaving me alone. Recently, it seems Yvonne has found a boyfriend. I was secretly hoping she would tell me about getting engaged soon. And just as I hoped, Yvonne told me she was proposed to by him. However, there was a shadow in Yvonne's expression. Wondering if there was a reason, I asked her.
What's wrong, Yvonne? You're about to get married, but you seem down.
Yvonne answered awkwardly. You know, Mom. I wanted to live with you or at least live nearby after I got married, so we could be just like we've always been. Yvonne started the conversation by talking about him and his family. His name is Tom. It seems he's an employee at a pharmaceutical company that visits the hospital where Yvonne works. However, Tom's mother is adamant about living with her son's wife. It appears she lost her husband 2 years ago and doesn't want to lose her only son as well. I can understand feeling lonely if she recently lost her husband, unlike me. Thinking this, I told Yvonne. You know, his mom might be feeling really lonely right now, wanting her son close. I kinda get it. But, being alone would be the same for you, Mom. Yvonne said, worried about me. Nevertheless, what's most important right now is Yvonne's happiness.
Don't worry about me. I'll be fine on my own. Just focus on being happy with him.
I reassured her, wanting Yvonne to feel at ease about her happiness. Some time passed, and Yvonne brought her fiancé Tom to our home. Tom, with his bright and gentle personality, seemed like a very nice man. I felt reassured that he would make her happy. However, when I met Tom's mother and realized Yvonne would be living with her, I was shocked and worried for Yvonne. The meeting took place at Tom's family home. This house would become Yvonne's new home, where she would live from now on. Dressed in a new suit, I went with Yvonne to Tom's house, thinking this. Their house was bigger and more impressive than I imagined. Seeing the grand entrance, I involuntarily gasped. Given that she's from such a wealthy-looking family, she must be a person of much higher standing than me. Sensing my feelings, Yvonne eased my tension. Mom, you don't need to be so nervous. Just relax. Right. Sorry. There's no point in me being nervous. I replied with a smile, not wanting to worry Yvonne. Then, taking a deep breath, I pressed the doorbell. Tom greeted us at the door with a warm smile. We've been expecting you. Please, come in. He said, easing my tension somewhat. But then, seeing Tom's mother appear from behind him made me catch my breath. The woman seemed familiar, as if I had seen her somewhere before.
Nice to meet you. I'm Tom's mother, Sally.
Hearing that name, a woman I knew from the past came to mind. Excuse me, by any chance, are you Sally Anderson from high school? Eh? Yes, my maiden name was Anderson, but who you might be? Indeed, she was Sally, a woman from my high school days, 2 years older than me, and a member of the same club. I'm Nora Kirk, went to same high school. I responded, making an awkward face. Sally's expression suddenly turned stern as if she remembered who I was. Back in high school, Sally was particularly harsh on me. For reasons I never understood, seemingly holding a grudge and often being mean. However, Sally's stern face quickly softened. Oh, Nora? We both changed our last names, so I didn't recognize you. Sally said with a smile. It's been over 40 years since we graduated from high school, so she might not even remember being mean to me anymore. After the greetings at the entrance, we were led inside. There was a spacious guest room. Sally made some tea and then asked me, "Are you really okay with giving your daughter to us?" Being asked so directly if I was okay with giving away my daughter caught me off guard. But I knew I had to endure it for Yvonne's happiness. "Yes. I might have my shortcomings, but please take good care of her," I said. Sally looked at me with a sharp expression and said in a condescending tone, "Let me make this clear, Tom is the precious heir of this family. So, his wife will have to follow my guidelines." And what would those be? Nothing difficult. Just don't go against what I've decided or neglect me, that's all. Her expression gradually took on the look of that girl from high school. The fact that living together was a non-negotiable condition had already made me anticipate a strict household, but it seemed there might be even stricter conditions than I imagined. I started to worry about Yvonne's future. But that doesn't mean I can oppose her marriage. Because Tom is a good person, I decided to trust him completely and leave Yvonne in his care. Once Yvonne got married and I was left alone, I focused solely on my job. I wanted to stay healthy and not worry Yvonne with any health issues, even if I got sick. However, one day, something happened. The corn we ordered arrived at the cafeteria, but nobody was there because it was lunch break. A 66-pound bag of corn left at the entrance would always get a remark from the nurses. With no other choice, I decided to carry it to the storeroom myself. "Here goes!" I exclaimed, lifting it, only to feel a sharp pain in my back the moment I did. I hurriedly put the bag down but couldn't move from the spot. Enduring the pain, I managed to call out for help. My voice somehow reached outside the cafeteria, and a nurse rushed over to help. I was then taken to the examination room. It turned out I had thrown out my back. Years of standing and working had taken their toll on my already tall frame, and I had been suffering from back pain for a long time. I had to be hospitalized and remain at rest until I recovered. I had tried so hard not to worry Yvonne. Lying in the hospital bed, thinking about it made me feel pathetic. Then, that night, Yvonne came to the hospital. "Mom, are you okay? I got a call from your workplace and was surprised. But sorry for coming so late." "Oh, it's fine. You have your own family to look after. I'm sorry for worrying you. It's just a thrown-out back, I'll be fine," I replied, smiling to reassure Yvonne. But Yvonne, concerned for me, said, "Mom, you've been pushing yourself too hard raising me. It's my turn to take care of you. I can't be around because of work, but I'll send money to make sure you don't struggle financially. So, please take your time to rest and focus on healing your back." I was truly touched by Yvonne's kindness. However, I wondered if Sally would approve of the financial help. "I appreciate the thought, but is your mother-in-law okay with it?" "Yeah. I'll talk to her when I get home today. It'll be fine." For now, Yvonne agreed to deposit the money into my account, so I told her where to find my bank card at home and asked her to take care of it. My back turned out to be more seriously injured than I thought, and my hospital stay became prolonged. Even after being discharged from the hospital, I couldn't move around as I wished, so I couldn't even go to the bank's ATM to withdraw the allowance I was receiving. While I was thinking about this, the intercom rang. When I answered through the monitor, it was Sally who had come. As I made my way to the entrance, leaning on walls for support, and opened the door, Sally looked at me with concern and said, "Oh, Nora. I'm sorry for making you strain yourself. Here, hold on to my shoulder, and I'll help you inside." No sooner had she said this than she placed my arm over her shoulder and helped me into the house. Caught off guard by her sudden kindness, she sat me down and softly spoke. "Nora, it must be tough being alone, especially since Yvonne can't come because of work. But if there's anything you need, just let me know, okay?" I felt a sense of unease with Sally suddenly being so nice, but I kept my composure. No, it's me who should be sorry for the trouble my daughter, Yvonne, has caused by working late. But what brings you here today? When I asked, Sally replied with a smug look. Since Yvonne is busy, I've decided to bring you the monthly allowance myself. She then handed me two $10 bills. What is this money for? I asked, dumbfounded, and Sally burst into laughter. How funny. Isn't it sad to call it a financial support when it's just this much? Considering Tom's earnings, there should be more than enough, but Yvonne is being too reserved. I see. It was indeed strange for my allowance to be only $20 a month. Yvonne should be able to give more from her own earnings without relying on Tom's salary. Then, Sally, more smugly than before, said, Since it's just $20, it would be a waste to pay a transfer fee. So, I've decided to bring it directly to you from now on. I'd like to contribute a bit myself, but I don't want to make you feel obliged. Instead, I'll help out with anything, like shopping or doing the laundry, so just tell me whenever you need anything. Though I found it strange, I didn't want to cause any trouble, so I gratefully accepted Sally's offer. From that day, Sally started coming to our house daily, taking care of cleaning, laundry, and meal preparation. She seemed genuinely kind, different from her high school days. I began to open up to Sally. Since she offered to go shopping too, I entrusted her with my cash card. After dinner was ready, Sally would leave around 5 p.m. to go home. In the evening, as I was about to eat dinner alone, Yvonne called.
Mom, I'm sorry for not being able to contact you much.
It was the first time in a while I heard Yvonne's voice. I made sure to thank her for the allowance, even though it was small.
No, thank you for the allowance every month. Even $20 means a lot to me.
After I said this, there was a pause. Then, Yvonne responded with something unbelievable.
What? I've been sending $2,600 every month. What? I've only been receiving $20 from your mother-in-law.
There was another silence. Are you receiving it in person? Yes, I've been getting it directly from your mother-in-law every month. Yvonne sounded puzzled and then raised her voice in excitement.
I talked to my family about the allowance and said I'd transfer it during my break, but my mother-in-law said she'd handle it for me.
Could you put her on the phone, please? She's still there, right? Oh. She usually goes home by 5 p.m. like today.
What? No, she tells me she's taking care of you every night and doesn't come home until late.
I was surprised by Yvonne's words. Why would Sally lie about something like that? Yvonne seemed to have grown suspicious of her actions. For now, when my mother-in-law comes back, I'll confront her. Yvonne was still worked up, but I worried about how this might affect her family relationship. Yvonne, don't worry about me. Just try to talk to her calmly, without getting too worked up.
What are you saying, Mom? It's unnatural not to know what happened to $2,600 every month.
Right, then you should talk to Tom about it. He knows about the allowance, doesn't he? I advised her, hoping to calm her down. Okay, I got it. I'll call you back if anything happens. Yvonne hung up after saying that. I regretted causing trouble for Yvonne's new family. Waiting for her call, I couldn't help but worry about potential trouble at their home. About 2 hours later, Yvonne called back. Mom, my mother-in-law hasn't come back yet, but I wanted to tell you something before she does. Hearing Yvonne speak in a strange tone made me anxious about what had happened. Actually, when I was cleaning my mother-in-law's room earlier, I found a strange photo. It looks like a group photo from her high school club activities. A club activity group photo? What about it? Yvonne continued with some difficulty. In that photo, the face of the tallest girl is blacked out with a marker, and on top of that, it's been scratched with a cutter knife. I think it might be you, Mom. Indeed, when I joined, I was the tallest among the female members. I remembered having that photo. Now that you mention it, I had that photo too. I was on the back row, on the far left. Yes. That's the person in the photo. It looked like it was done with so much hatred. Yvonne told me, prompting me to look back on my high school days. The harassment from Sally started soon after I joined. She was kind to other club members but harsh to me, always burdening me with chores. I wondered why Sally disliked me so much. I'll confront her about this photo. And, Mom, I'm really sorry for not being able to give you proper living expenses until now. What's wrong? Why change the subject all of a sudden? Because when I went to update your bank account today, it looked like a lot of money had been spent. There's hardly any balance left. From now on, I'll take responsibility for bringing you the living expenses. Yvonne told me, making me feel a chill down my spine. Because I had entrusted my cash card to Sally. When I told Yvonne, she quickly retorted.
What? So, does that mean my mother-in-law withdrew everything? I knew something was off. It's impossible for Mom to withdraw $6,000 a month. $6,000? The most I asked her to buy was worth about $40 a day.
It turns out Sally had dipped into not just the living expenses from Yvonne but also into my savings. This is serious. I'm going to the bank right now to freeze the account. The main office should still be open, so I can take care of the procedures immediately. Yvonne said before hanging up. From the next day, Sally stopped coming to our house. Then, 3 days later in the morning, I heard a car stopping in front of our house and went out to check. It was Tom's car. Since it was Saturday, Tom was off work. Getting out of the car were Yvonne, looking furious, and Tom, firmly holding Sally's arm. It seemed Yvonne had confronted Sally about the living expenses and the cash card. Sally had the look of someone who was brought along against her will. Yvonne came up to me and loudly said, "Mom, my mother-in-law was spending the $2,600 she was supposed to give as an allowance. The day before yesterday, I followed her and saw her freaking out at the ATM because she couldn't withdraw money, so I confronted her, and she confessed." "What? Why would she do that?" I asked, looking towards Sally. Sally, avoiding eye contact, answered in a low voice. "I was lonely after losing my husband."
Just because you were lonely, you thought it was okay to use someone else's money?
Tom yelled at her, still holding her arm. Then, he looked at me and apologized.
"I'm sorry, Nora. I'll make sure she pays back every penny she used." "No, Tom, it's not your place to apologize. I shouldn't have trusted Sally and left her with my cash card."
Tom then angrily said to Sally,
"Why didn't you return the cash card right after shopping? Did you always keep it with you?"
No matter what was said, Sally remained silent. Yvonne, looking more intimidating, glared at Sally.
"Just because $2,600 wasn't enough, you even dipped into my mom's account. We'll make sure you pay back everything you've used."
"Wait, Yvonne. It's okay for me." I couldn't forgive Sally for using the money without permission. Yet, the thought of Yvonne's new family becoming strained was too painful for me.
"Let's just talk this over calmly,"
I suggested, trying to calm everyone down as we entered the house for a discussion. There was something more important than money that needed to be confirmed. I didn't believe Sally was really spending money for some young man. There must have been another reason she was harassing me. We wanted to confirm this directly with her. "Sally, why have you been harassing me since the old days?" For Yvonne to continue living in your house with peace of mind, I want to hear the real reason. Sally, looking like she was recalling unpleasant memories, answered, "Because I have a grudge against you." I was shocked by her unexpected response. What could I have possibly done to her? I tried to think of any reason, but nothing came to mind. A grudge? Did I do something to hurt you, Sally? If there was something you didn't like, I wish you'd tell me honestly. Then, Sally, with anger in her voice, glared at me. "When you entered high school, you stole my boyfriend. He was the one I loved, and as soon as you joined the club, he fell for you." I was taken aback by her words. When I had just joined the club, there was a senior boy who started talking to me. We hit it off and began dating soon after. And after graduating from college, I married him. I had no idea he had been dating Sally before me.
I'm sorry. I had no idea he was dating you.
I apologized, but it seemed like my words didn't reach Sally.
I confronted him, and he said he fell for you because you were always considerate of those around you, and that's why he broke up with me. What made me angry wasn't that you took him from me, but that he loved you more than he did me.
Everyone, including Tom and Yvonne, was shocked by Sally's reasoning.
You've been holding on to this old grudge all this time? So, you've been jealous of my mom and harassing her now because of that? That's just too selfish.
Confronted by her son and daughter-in-law, Sally, with a miserable look, yelled as if to shake off their accusations.
Shut up. He was really important to me. Because of her, I was so shocked I couldn't even think about love again. I even ended up marrying someone my parents chose for me. She ruined my life.
Sally pointed at me, tears streaming down her face. But no one sympathized with her. I had my own hardships. Being ridiculed for my height since I was young. But in high school, I decided to value a kind heart over appearance. It led me to make good friends and find love. However, explaining this to Sally now seemed futile. To avoid escalating the situation, I calmly told Sally.
Even though I didn't know, I apologize for hurting you, Sally. But holding on to that grudge will only hurt Tom and Yvonne. I'll try to stay out of your way to not cause any more trouble. Please, take good care of Yvonne as your daughter-in-law.
Yvonne looked at me, surprised. Why? You did nothing wrong.
It's okay. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters to me.
Sally, with a complex expression, heard our conversation. Stop it, please. Always playing the good person, that's what I've always hated about you from the start. Sally's eyes filled with even larger tears. She likely realizes her own faults but can't openly admit them. Right now, her heart may be wandering in darkness. Honestly, I no longer wanted Yvonne to stay in a family with such a woman. If possible, I wanted to be by Yvonne's side. But, unsure of what to do, I was at a loss for words. Noticing this, Tom raised his voice in a firm manner.
Enough is enough. I'm fed up with you, Mom. After all, it's your own fault you got dumped. And then you blame others, harboring jealousy and resorting to harassment.
Tom's vehement outburst seemed to shock Sally. Tom, what are you saying? You're not usually one to speak like that. She probably thought her son would always comply with her wishes. But Tom is an honorable person. It's natural for him to criticize what's wrong, even if it involves a parent. Yvonne, with a serious gaze towards Sally, added, I wanted to have a good relationship with you. That's why I trusted you with the allowance and my mother's care. But now, I can no longer trust you, nor do I want to try to get along. Sally looked bitter at Yvonne's words.
Yvonne! How dare you, being so arrogant as a daughter-in-law? Tom! Divorce her right now and kick her out. The one leaving is you, Mom.
Tom yelled back, leaving everyone stunned. Sally's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief.
To tell me to leave, Tom? I've wanted to say this for a while, but Mom always thinks you're right. You never considers the feelings of your family or anyone else, just saying whatever you want, acting selfishly. Dad even said he wanted to leave you, but couldn't because you had no means to support yourself. I've had enough of living with a mother like that.
Tom unleashed his feelings toward his mother, feelings he had likely held back for a long time. Tears flowed again from Sally's eyes. Being criticized to such an extent by her own son, she probably had no words to return. She then knelt on the floor and began to cry out loud. Yet, Tom showed no mercy.
Cry or scream all you want, no one is going to take your side. You said it yourself, didn't you? That your marriage, arranged by your parents, ruined your life.
As Tom said this, Sally stopped crying and looked up. But she seemed unable to meet his gaze, looking away instead. Tom also had a sorrowful expression. Indeed, such matters shouldn't be discussed in front of one's child. As if regretting even having them. With tears in his eyes, Tom said,
"I'm severing our parent-child ties. So, please, just leave. And of course, make sure you repay the money you embezzled to Yvonne and Nora."
Sally, spoken to in this way, kept her head down without responding. Likely, she had no means to repay the money. But more than that, the sorrow of being abandoned by her beloved son seemed unbearable.
"Why do I alone have to endure such hardship?"
she lamented, thinking she was the most aggrieved. If only she could humbly admit her faults and say I'm sorry, perhaps someone could have supported her. I've decided to completely give up on Sally. I'll leave the rest to Tom and Yvonne. Consequently, Sally was expelled from the house. Following discussions with Tom and Yvonne, it was agreed that the embezzled money would be repaid gradually from her survivor's pension and earnings from part-time work. However, for Sally, who had never worked before, just getting by would likely be a struggle. Overwhelmed by the unfamiliar stress of life and work, Sally reportedly made advances to a male customer at her part-time job. The man, also single and about her age, didn't show any disdain towards Sally's advances, and they started dating. However, life doesn't always go smoothly. One day, after staying over at Sally's apartment, the man ran off with her wallet, bank card while she was asleep. A report was filed immediately, but since the man had used a fake name, his true identity and whereabouts remained unknown. In the end, Sally lost everything and now works tirelessly at 2 jobs. I was informed by Yvonne. This is why repayments to me will be delayed for a while. However, I'm not concerned about the money. More so, I felt pity for Sally, who had lived without love, now drowning in it so late in life. Sally, who couldn't even fulfill her role as a mother. She might now live a lonely life without anyone by her side. As for me, my back pain has significantly improved, and I'm considering returning to work soon. But I'm thinking of postponing that for a while. Tom and Yvonne, who have been working hard together, have welcomed their first child. They named her Maureen. They were considering placing her in daycare, but I offered to take care of Maureen instead. Yvonne was delighted, but Tom hesitantly said,
"I really appreciate your offer, Nora, but it's too much to ask, especially since your back pain has just healed."
Tom's concern made me feel a bit embarrassed. Then, Yvonne suggested,
"How about this? Until Maureen turns 1, we can both take turns taking parental leave while Mom helps us out. That way, it won't be too much of a burden on her, right?" "That sounds like a plan. Sharing the responsibility of child rearing means no one gets overwhelmed, and it creates a better family environment."
Yes, raising a child is something the whole family should cooperate on. With such a family environment, I'm sure Maureen will grow up to be a wonderful child. I stared intently at her face. Then, it seemed like she looked back at me and smiled.
"Look, everyone, she just smiled."
The family was warmed by her first smile.
Seeing such a lovely smile makes me almost forget my back pain. I want to cherish these happy moments for as long as possible.
In the early afternoon on a weekday, feeling unwell, I brought my daughter back home and noticed something odd upon arrival. There shouldn't have been anyone at home, yet my husband's car was parked outside for some reason. Didn't Dad say he was gonna drive to the ceremony? That day, my husband was supposed to have left early in the morning to attend a relative's wedding by car. Feeling my heartbeat quicken, I said, "Let's just go inside for now," and quietly entered the house. Then, from the bedroom on the 2nd floor, I could hear some noises. With a sinking feeling, I approached the bedroom. The bedroom door was slightly open, allowing me to sneak a peek inside, even though it was dim. When I stealthily looked inside, I was met with an unbelievable scene. What? I couldn't help but let out a sound. My daughter also peeks inside from behind me, and then, with a eek, she closes her eyes and steps back. In the bed was my husband. And a familiar woman. The figure of my mother-in-law, my husband's mother. Yes, what was unfolding before me and my daughter was the scene of their infidelity. My husband, who had always been kind to both me and my daughter. The mother-in-law who was easy to talk to and helped with raising our child. Beautiful memories shatter loudly, like fragile glass breaking into pieces.
What? This is disgusting. Absolutely not. Horrible. Mom, over here.
My daughter quietly tugged at my hand, urging me to step back from the scene. Tears were welling up in her eyes, seemingly about to cry at the worst sight imaginable. I too was stunned, my mind going blank, unable to move. But how could I forgive these two for such betrayal? I decided to contact someone. My name is Samantha, 45 years old. I live with Ken, who is 5 years younger than me, and our daughter, Madison, a freshman in college. Ken and I met through a friend, and it didn't take long for us to start dating. After about a year, we began living together. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and soon, Ken proposed to me at a restaurant with a beautiful night view, and we decided to get married. The first time I met Ken's parents during the marriage introduction, I thought they seemed very classy and kind. However, what caught my attention was how young Ken's mother, Minnie, appeared. She looked incredibly youthful and beautiful, not matching her age. I married Ken when I was about 25. Usually, parents around this time are about 50 years old. But no matter how you looked at it, Ken's mom didn't seem to be around 50. She was slim and very beautiful. Seeing my confusion, Ken explained from behind, "My parents remarried when I was in middle school. My dad was 49, and my stepmom was 37 then. It was one of those age gap marriages." That made sense to me. When Dad brought Mom home saying he wanted to remarry when I was in 5th grade, I was shocked by her youth and had a mixed feelings. Yeah, it would be surprising to have such a beautiful person as your new mom. Well, but Dad seemed happy, so I was happy too, and now I'm glad she became part of the family, he said with a gentle smile. I had never heard much about Ken's past, so getting to know more about him as we were getting married felt good. Minnie was easy to talk to, perhaps because of her youth. "Did Ken propose properly?" she asked with a grin.
"Yes, at a fancy restaurant with a beautiful night view." "Wow, that's lovely. And? What do you like about Ken?" "Well, I guess it's his kindness. Also, he notices little things like if I change my makeup."
Minnie was so easy to talk to that I found myself gushing without realizing. "Ah, Ken's got good points, huh?" Minnie said, nudging Ken with her elbow. "Come on, Mom, stop it." "That's embarrassing," Ken said, blushing but looking pleased. Though not related by blood, it was clear the in-laws really got along well. When my husband introduced me to his in-laws, he said this. "When Dad first brought Mom over, I was going through puberty, so it was a bit complicated. But more than that, I was happy. I had been lonely since I was a child, without siblings or a mother. But when Mom became part of the family, our home felt brighter. I realized then that you don't have to be blood-related to be a real family. That's why I want to build a happy and close family with Samantha, just like Dad and Mom. I want us to become a true family." My husband said that and held my hand. Ken. I felt as if I saw his commitment to our marriage. He had overcome loneliness with his family. I resolved in my heart to cherish Ken and to become a family like his parents. When I introduced Ken to my parents, they quickly became friendly thanks to his inherent brightness. My parents warmly accepted him, and we were blessed by many relatives and friends at our wedding. Soon after, we were blessed with a child. "Really? I'm gonna be a dad?" Ken was surprised but beamed with joy at the news of my pregnancy. The in-laws felt the same, truly celebrating my pregnancy. After a while, we found out the sex of the baby and learned that it was a girl. "A girl, huh? I'm gonna be worried all the time." "Ken, you're likely to be super protective." Man, if she ever brings home a boyfriend, I might just die of loneliness. If you say that, she might end up hating you. Even before she was born, we would laugh together. Those times were truly happy. Since getting pregnant, he has been working even harder at his job and has been more proactive than ever in helping around the house.
Sorry for making you cook dinner after just getting back from work.
When my morning sickness was bad, he would even cook after coming home late from work. He says, "What are you talking about? Men can only stand by and watch, so let me at least do this." He also took care of me by bringing a blanket when he thought I might be cold, saying, "Hey, don't chill yourself," and insisting on carrying heavy items. "Give me that bag, I'll carry it." Even when I said, "I'm fine," he would insist, "No, give it here," and always took the initiative to help me. Thanks to my husband, both the baby and I were doing well. One day, I got a call from my mother.
Aren't you planning on coming home for the birth?
I hadn't really thought about it.
It's your first birth, so there must be a lot of worries, right? You can come home for a while if you want.
Really? Is that okay?
Of course. You should lean on us at times like this.
Grateful for my mother's kind words, I thanked her and replied, "Thank you. I'll talk to Ken about it." Nowadays, about half of all expectant mothers go back to their parental home before and after giving birth. Honestly, there were many things I didn't know and was anxious about with this being my first birth, so my mother's suggestion was very welcome.
I'll discuss it with Ken.
After hanging up with my mom and waiting a bit, I brought it up with Ken when he returned from work. My mom called today and asked if I'm considering going back home to give birth. I'm all for it. What do you want to do, Samantha? Well, to be honest, it would be reassuring to have my mom, who has experience in child-rearing, around.
Yeah, that sounds good. My company doesn't offer paternity leave, and it would be a relief for me too if there's someone reliable near you in case something happens.
If you want to go back home, I support it.
Thank you. Then it's decided.
Ken respected my wishes and was supportive of me going back home. And so, I was able to welcome the birthday without any problems. I named my daughter Madison, hoping she would grow up to value the connections between people and to be kind and considerate. After giving birth, I went back to my parents' house and spent some time there with my parents and daughter. The house will be left empty for a while, but considering my husband is good at household chores, I doubt I'll come back to find the house in a mess after being away for some time. He could manage to cook simple meals by himself, so I didn't have to worry about his brief stint living alone. On weekends, the three of us, Madison, Ken, and I, would live together. "I can change diapers now, I've practiced," he'd say, managing it perfectly as if he'd been practicing at home. Seeing him taking care of me and Madison even when I was not around made me smile naturally. Every day I felt grateful for having married such a wonderful person, both as a husband and as a father. When I returned home after the birth, the house was not at all messy and was kept in a clean state, just as I expected. Moreover, there was a new baby crib that I had wanted, along with a lot of diapers, toys, and clothes for the baby.
What's all this? Did you buy all this?
Pretty good, right? Actually, my dad and mom bought these as a gift for the baby.
Really? That's so kind. I'll send them a thank you message later. Oh, do that. Mom even said cooking might be hard for you after work, so she cooked and brought over a bunch of frozen meals. She's really a warrior, isn't she?
It seems that my mother-in-law had visited several times while I was away.
She is amazing. I have a lot to learn from her. It's just that my mom is too incredible.
He was laughing in amazement. Ken has always been one to heap praise on his mother. From the outside, one might think he's a bit of a mama's boy, as he often talks about his mother. He would say things like, "For her age, Mom is really beautiful," or "The meals Mom makes are out of this world," and at the beginning of our marriage, it bothered me a bit, but he never said I should be like his mother. Above all, Ken is very kind to me, calling me cute and praising my cooking as the best. So, I tried not to dwell on it too much. Thanks to my in-laws and husband, both my daughter and I were able to live comfortably and happily every day. Eventually, my maternity leave ended, and it was time for me to return to work for the first time in a while, leaving my daughter at preschool. However, a week before returning, my boss informed me, "Samantha, I'm sorry, but you've been transferred to a different department starting next week." During my maternity leave, it seems they were short-staffed and hired someone new. I had been told before going on maternity leave that returning to the same department is not guaranteed, so I understand that it can't be helped. Honestly, I'm quite anxious, but living on just Ken's salary is not enough, so becoming a stay-at-home mom is not an option. I'm feeling down, but I have to psyche myself up and give it my all. Then came the first day back. The facilities and atmosphere had changed since I was last at work, and I found myself bewildered. Above all, having been transferred to a different department after such a long break, the work was completely different, and I was struggling just to keep up with everyone every day. I felt deeply how challenging it is to juggle childcare and work. I wonder if I can really manage both work and childcare from now on. As these days continued, I found myself expressing my concerns to Ken. He seemed a bit surprised since I usually don't make such downhearted remarks. "It's okay. You're just confused because of the new job and unfamiliar childcare. It'll settle down eventually." "Cheer up," he said while patting my head, but I remained downcast. Then Ken suggested, "What if we ask my mom for help with childcare?" "Your mom?" "Yeah, my mom. She's never raised children and really wants to be more involved with the baby." "Is that so?"
Yes. She'd be thrilled to spend time with the baby, and it might help you relax a bit, right? Just knowing someone nearby is willing to help can make a big difference. What do you think?
If Minnie is really willing to help, it would be more than I could ask for. Is it really okay to rely on her so much? It's fine. In fact, she'll be happy. Saying this, Ken took out his smartphone and stepped out of the living room. After a while, he came back and gave me a peace sign, indicating she's happy to help. It seems he had already discussed it with Minnie. From then on, Minnie started to visit our house more frequently and, being a stay-at-home mom herself, actively helped with childcare. Some days, I'd come home from work to find that Minnie had cooked dinner or had picked up Madison from preschool. She also said, "Ken and I can watch Madison, so feel free to go back to your parents' house and relax without the child occasionally," and she and Ken's dad would sometimes take Madison out, really spoiling us. With Minnie's full support, we somehow managed to raise our daughter. Time flew by, and Madison turned 17. Becoming a lawyer has been Madison's dream since she was young. To achieve her dream, her goal seems to be attending a prestigious university, and she has been very busy lately with tutoring and extra classes. During this time, we received a wedding invitation from father-in-law's sister's granddaughter, Emily. "Emily, huh? It's been a while. Have you met her, Samantha?" "I met her briefly when we went to your parents' house for Christmas." "Right, not much acquaintance there." "The whole family is invited, but do you think we can attend that day?" "I'm fine. I can take a day off work." "But I wonder about Madison." "Well, it's a crucial time for her." "Yeah. Then, maybe I should go alone this time." "It's a shame after they invited all of us, but is that okay?" "It's fine. Everyone will understand. We can't leave Madison at home alone." "You're right, thank you. How are you getting to the venue?" The wedding venue for Emily seems to be a stylish place with a forest atmosphere, judging from the photos on the invitation. It's a lovely place, but it seems a bit hard to reach by train. Well, I won't be able to drink, but maybe I should drive." "That seems like the best idea." "Be careful." With my husband's suggestion, prioritizing our daughter, Madison and I will be absent, and only Ken will attend Emily's wedding. On the day of the wedding, Ken was dressed in his suit, his hair perfectly styled.
"Wow, Dad, looking sharp. Make sure to send photos from the wedding, okay?"
Heh, right? Oh, I'll send them. Keep up with your studies, Madison. Take care. With that, my husband headed off to the wedding venue. A while later, after sending Madison off to school, I went to work. I thought it was going to be just another regular day, but around lunchtime, I got a call from the school saying Madison seems to be feeling very unwell. Worried it might be the flu going around, I left work early in a panic to pick her up. I arrived at the school, put her in the car, and we headed straight to the hospital for a checkup, and fortunately, it wasn't the flu but likely just fatigue from the change of seasons. Both she and I were relieved, and I bought some easy-to-eat porridge and jelly for her before heading home. Once home, I noticed something odd. Ken's car, which shouldn't have been there, was parked in the driveway. Huh? Why is his car here? He was supposed to go by car, wasn't he? And I had seen him off this morning as he got into the car. Could he have forgotten something? But we checked last night that he had the wedding gift in his bag. What else could be so important that he had to come back for? Madison also noticed the car and asked, "Huh? Didn't Dad go by car today? Is he home?" tilting her head. Trying not to let my turmoil show, I replied, maybe he ended up taking the train after all. While we both found it strange, we cautiously opened the front door. As we entered, my heart skipped a beat in dread. Lined up next to Ken's shoes were a pair of women's shoes that I had never seen before. It was clear they weren't mine. A terrible suspicion began to swell inside me, and I could feel my heart racing faster than usual. What? Why? Is someone here? Why? We looked at each other. No, it can't be. Madison seemed to share my dread, and we stood there, stunned. Let's go in slowly. Though puzzled, Madison followed my lead, careful to make no noise. And so, we quietly entered the house. Even as we stepped into the living room, there was no sign of anyone. See, Dad's not here after all. I'm going back to my room. When my daughter was about to go back to her room, I called out, "Wait a minute, want to go up together?" I was unable to shake off the uneasy feeling despite her wanting to go up alone. Thus, we went upstairs together. But halfway up, we noticed something amiss. Isn't the light in Mom and Dad's bedroom on? I was sure I had turned off all the lights before heading out this morning. I thought I turned it off. Wait, Mom, do you hear that? Indeed, there was a faint sound, barely audible. It seemed to be coming from our bedroom. I walked ahead, filled with dread, and approached the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, allowing us to glimpse inside the dimly lit room. Peering in stealthily, we were confronted with an unbelievable scene. What? I couldn't help but let out a sound. My daughter, peeking from behind me, screamed, "No!" Inside, there were my mother-in-law and husband who should have been attending Emily's wedding. Furthermore, anyone could see they were blatantly engaged in an affair, completely naked. Witnessing such a scene, my daughter said ugh and, covering her mouth, started to retch as she backed away. Why? It's so gross, I can't handle this. This is horrible. Mom, over here. In a whisper, Madison tried to pull me away from the spot. Tears filled her eyes, about to cry at the horrible sight. I was in the same state. My mind went blank, and I stood there, dazed, unable to move. Madison repeatedly tugged at my hand, calling out, "Mom." How could I have not noticed before? My always kind husband. The husband who perfectly managed household chores and childcare. My beloved husband. As both Madison's father and my spouse, I believed he was the ideal man without a doubt. Madison felt the same way. She respected her gentle father. Today, she even complimented him, saying, "You look cool," as we saw him off together. I regret exposing my daughter to such a horrendous scene. Both Madison and I loved my husband and Minnie. Yet, in an instant, our happiness crumbled. Since the beginning of our marriage, my husband always looked at Minnie with kind eyes. He would frequently invite her over, and she was even visiting our home during my pregnancy. He also excessively praised her. It would be a lie to say I never found it strange. But I believed there was a genuine parent-child love between them, even if they weren't biologically related. I trusted them. But the love between my husband and Minnie was not of a normal parent and child, but as lovers. As I was standing dazed in my daughter's room, she said, "Mom, we can't just stand by. We need to take action." "I have an idea," and she went back towards the bedroom. Then she pulled out her smartphone and started recording a video of the two, caught in the act.
"What are you doing filming that?"
I tried to stop her in a panic, but Madison insisted, "We have to. We need solid evidence so those two can't deny anything," and continued filming. She seemed disgusted, closing her eyes to avoid the sight but kept recording to gather evidence.
"Madison, are you okay?"
I was concerned about her since she was feeling unwell earlier, but she said, "I'm fine now, the adrenaline is kicking in." The evidence comes first, seemingly forgetting her ailment. Despite Madison and I whispering among ourselves, the two of them didn't notice at all. They must be so engrossed in each other that they've become oblivious to their surroundings. After a while of capturing evidence, Madison and I began to calm down somewhat. How should we confront them? Just then, from the bedroom, I heard my husband suggestively saying, "Mama, let's take a bath together."
"Madison, they're coming out of the bedroom. This is bad."
Madison and I quickly hid in her room. "Ew, he's calling her mama?" "Gross," Madison muttered under her breath. What should we do in this situation? Should we confront my husband and Minnie with the video evidence, threatening to expose them? No, emotions would likely get in the way, and we wouldn't be able to have a rational discussion. Besides, Madison and I alone might not be able to stand up to them. Then, I had a plan. As soon as Minnie and my husband entered the bathroom, I threw all their clothes into the trash can. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Come in," I beckoned the guests into the living room. Hearing the commotion outside, my husband and Minnie came out of the bathroom, opening the door to the changing area.
"Why are you?"
Our home's layout has the bathroom adjacent to the living room, separated by a door. In the living room, next to it, were Madison, me, and the father-in-law, along with other relatives all gathered. My husband panicked, trying to cover himself. "What's going on? Why are you dressed like that?" Seeing my smiling face, my husband was startled. "Oh, the wedding ended early, so I was taking a bath, but I forgot to bring a change of clothes." Despite not attending the wedding, you had the nerve to lie about it right in front of those who are there, and it was a lie that got found out almost immediately. "Oh, Ken. You weren't at the wedding, were ya?" "No, Sure enough, my husband got called out by his father and stumbled over his words. "Your mother is inside too, right? Can you tell her to come out before she catches a cold?" I pointed out, and he stumbled again, My mom is, well." Seeing Ken unable to answer anything, his father snapped.
"Hey! You, come out too!"
Saying this, he pushed Ken and went into the changing room, pulling out his mother by the hand.
"No!"
Eventually, dragged out forcibly by his father, my mother-in-law also appeared in front of all the relatives, covering her private parts just like Ken. "Dad, Grandma, it's gross, so get dressed quickly," my daughter said calmly and threw clothes at them. For a while, the two who had been hiding in the changing room, shivering with lips blue from cold, hurried to put their clothes on. Once dressed, my father-in-law spoke up.
"Can you explain to me why the two of you were in there together?"
He questioned my husband and my mother-in-law, his face turning red as if it were about to burst into flames. I was feeling unwell, and Ken was just helping me. My mother-in-law started with an excuse that made no sense.
"And how do you explain this?"
With those words from my father-in-law, all the relatives started to play a video showing Ken and my mother-in-law together. "How did you? What is this? When did this happen?" Their faces turned pale instantly. In fact, after recording my husband and mother-in-law, I had sent the video to my father-in-law on his way back from the wedding, with a message saying, "Here's the proof." It seems that after seeing the video, my father-in-law shared it with the relatives he was with, telling them, "Check this out." Thus, like a family gathering, everyone ended up at our house. Normally, my father-in-law is a calm person and doesn't involve others, but he couldn't remain calm after they skipped a family wedding and committed such betrayal.
Can you still say you didn't betray us, that you don't know anything about this?
Such harsh words, unlike my usually gentle father-in-law, filled the house. Following my father-in-law, other relatives also started hurling insults like, "You have a daughter and yet you do this, unbelievable as a parent, disgusting." And then I said to Ken, "Let's get a divorce." The divorce was already agreed upon by our daughter. After seeing something so disgusting, "I can't stay with Dad and Grandma, they're just too gross," she agreed vehemently with me. Even my father-in-law said, "Minnie, let's get a divorce." And Ken, from today onwards, we're no longer father and son. Well, seeing something like that, it's understandable. The word divorce coming from both me and my father-in-law clearly shook my husband and mother-in-law, who, not knowing what else to do, suddenly knelt down.
"I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I won't do it again. Please, forgive me. Please."
No matter how much they begged on their knees, our anger wasn't going to subside. I just said, "Get out of this house right now." They kept apologizing, but I refused to listen. In the end, my father-in-law grabbed Ken and my mother-in-law by the hands and said, "Think about Madison. Just leave, now," and threw them out. And then, as if following suit, the relatives dispersed. "Samantha, let's talk again sometime," my father-in-law said as he too left the house. Overwhelmed by everything that had happened, my daughter and I just sat down on the floor, exhausted. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm here for you," she said, patting my shoulder. But despite her brave front, tears were streaming down her face. "Madison, I'm okay because I have you. And you have me, Madison. From now on, it's just the two of us," I told her. I felt pathetic for always being the one supported by my daughter, but I resolved to make sure she would not feel lonely from now on. And a few days later, our divorce was finalized. At the same time, my father-in-law and mother-in-law also finalized their divorce. Ken kept apologizing and asking for forgiveness, but I consistently said impossible, and he seemed to have finally given up. With the help of a lawyer, I received alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. The video my daughter had suggested turned out to be really useful. It seems my father-in-law also received alimony from Ken and my ex-mother-in-law, but he wanted me to have all of it.
"This is yours, not mine. I've already received mine."
"No, please, take it." I failed as a father and as Minnie's husband. I believe I also had a part in this situation. "At least let me do this much for Madison and you," he insisted. Out of respect for his wishes, I accepted it and used it for my daughter's education. Honestly, the thought of financing my daughter's law school by myself was daunting, so I'm truly grateful to my father-in-law. And now, 10 years have passed. Madison has fulfilled her dream and become a lawyer. She's still new to the field but wants to use her knowledge to help those in need. She will face many challenges. But knowing Madison and her strong heart, she's bound to successfully overcome them and become a respectable lawyer. Since the incident, my ex-mother-in-law has been living alone in a shabby apartment. Having been a homemaker for many years, she had no job prospects and ended up working part-time at a grocery store. I don't know if she's managing well, but she must be struggling. As for Ken, it seems his relationship with his stepmom is truly over. After our respective divorces, they hardly met anymore. Perhaps they were only enjoying the thrill of the affair. As for my ex-husband, he has been completely ostracized by my father-in-law and treated like an outcast by the relatives since that day. Moreover, his company never paid well. After paying alimony to my father-in-law and me, he must be living a tight life. He did care deeply for Madison, but she told him, "I never want to see your face again," leaving him in tears. Since then, Madison and my ex-husband have not seen each other. Well, he got what he deserved. My father-in-law and I still keep in touch occasionally. He is also supportive of Madison's future. As for me, since my daughter has now become a working adult, my parenting has taken a back seat. Lately, my hobby has been traveling with my high school friend, Susan, who, just like me, got divorced after her husband had an affair and is now single.
We're getting older and I'm done with love, but creating new memories with friends, my daughter, and my father-in-law is something I look forward to.
So, I'm counting on you to pay back the debt. Suddenly, my husband dumped his debt on me and disappeared. No matter how many times I contacted him, I could never get through. What am I gonna do? I can't pay this huge amount. However, there were people who saved me when I was at my wit's end.
Mom, it's gonna be okay.
That was my daughter. My name is Emily Johnson, I'm 35 years old. I live with my husband, Michael, work full-time and juggling with house chores. I met Michael at a matchmaking party that was supposed to be a way to make up for something. I was nervous, but Michael approached me assertively, and before I knew it, we were getting along well and exchanged contacts. After that, as we kept in touch, we became attracted to each other. And then, we started dating. I never thought I'd end up dating a man I met at a matchmaking party. When we started dating, I mentioned Michael to my sister, Elizabeth. Then Elizabeth laughed out loud and said this. You, dating a guy you met at a matchmaking party? I thought you'd quietly date someone from work. I've always been a quiet type, and even after I started drinking, I never went out for drinks with colleagues or friends. I'm surprised myself. Just went to fill the numbers, right? Yeah. When I showed her a photo of Michael, she exclaimed, he's surprisingly handsome. After that, we talked a bit about each other's recent situations and then parted ways. Elizabeth is single and doesn't have a boyfriend. Apparently, she prefers being alone, so she has no intention of marrying or getting a boyfriend. I thought that was one way of thinking, but now I want to think about the future with Michael. How happy would I be if our relationship goes well, we marry, and have children? Oh yay! On the way back from talking to Elizabeth, my face naturally brightened. Years later, Michael and I happily got married. I remember bursting into tears when he proposed. We started living in a new apartment. We hadn't lived together before, so being with Michael all day was like a dream. We both worked full-time, so the time we came home varied. But still, we ate together and slept together. We made sure to spend a lot of time together. We had overlapping holidays, so we enjoyed lazy days at home or going out for drives, spending every day happily. Then, a change came for us. We had a child. I will never forget the moment she was born. She was a very small girl, fitting perfectly in my arms. This must be what happiness is. The mood of celebration came all at once from our relatives. We named our newborn girl Bella. After Bella was born, I quit my job and worked hard every day as a full-time housewife. Michael, seeing this, helped with the household and childcare despite being tired from work.
I'll take care of Bella, you rest. Thank you.
I thought I was lucky to have married Michael, but years later, I realized that was a mistake. A few years after Bella was born, Michael suddenly quit his job. Michael explained to me why he quit his job. Apparently, he couldn't get along with his new boss and was feeling stressed. But I wondered, shouldn't he have discussed it with me first? Sure, if my husband is suffering, quitting is an option. But now we have a family, and we were just getting by on Michael's income, so he could have at least talked to me about it a little. This is so sudden. Did you find another job yet? Don't worry, I've thought about that. His response was not very reassuring. Honestly, I was only feeling anxious, but I guess I had no choice but to trust Michael. Afterward, Michael quickly found a new job. That was a relief. I could go out and work too, but Bella is still young, and I didn't really want to make that choice. I just wanted to watch Bella grow up a little longer.
How's the new job? Can you manage?
Oh, yeah, well, kinda. Did something happen at work again? Problems with your boss or colleagues? No, it's fine. Don't worry so much. Look, I'll take care of Bella, you go take a bath. Okay? Thanks. Something seemed off. But I thought it might be too pushy to ask more, so I left Bella with him and went to take a bath. A few days later, Michael came home with a gloomy face. I wanted to ask if something had happened, but then I remembered that feeling from before. Yes, when Michael suddenly quit his job. Could he have quit again? I hoped my intuition was wrong. But that hope was quickly shattered. I quit my job. Why? It just didn't fit the people at the company. They kept ordering me around, being ordered around by someone much younger than me. I can't stand it anymore.
I see. Well, you can just look for another one, right? I'll help too.
Then, Michael's face suddenly turned scary. He raised his voice at me.
What's with that look? You don't like that I quit my job? You live off my money, after all. Talking down to me when you're just a housewife. Saying that, he threw his bag onto the living room sofa. Hey! Shut up!
Michael scratched his head and took out a drink from the fridge. He drank it all at once as if to quell his irritation. I had never seen Michael like this before. At the same time, an indescribable fear struck me. I had no intention of talking down to him, I just offered to help. It seemed Michael was quite irritated, and after yelling at me for a while, he heavily sat down on the sofa. I was listening to Michael, not understanding what was happening. Was this the day the rift between Michael and me began? From this point on, Michael would repeatedly get and quit jobs. We ended up living without a stable income. Hey, maybe it's time to get a proper job? At first, I tried not to nag, thinking of Michael, but things had come to this, and I couldn't help but speak up.
Shut up. You should earn the money then. You're relying too much on me.
But, Bella. I don't care. By this time, Michael had lost interest in Bella, treating her somewhat like a burden. He was genuinely happy when Bella was born, but he seemed like a completely different person now. No matter how much I begged, Michael wouldn't keep a job for long. After much thought, I decided to leave Bella with Elizabeth and start working myself. I'm sorry for leaving this to you.
No problem at all. Let's have fun together, Bella. Sure.
Bella had just started kindergarten, but I wasn't too worried. Part of it was because she was with Elizabeth, but Bella also seemed mature for her age. She would read newspapers and could even write stories with simple words. She was quiet and seemed wise beyond her years. Initially, I was honestly anxious. Would she be able to make friends? Could she communicate well with others besides me? However, it turned out there was no need for such worries, as she did make friends. As a parent, I felt very relieved. Given these circumstances, I judged it would be fine for me to start working. Surprisingly, I got a job fairly easily. Thus, I began working full-time. The salary was quite good. With this, I could support the family even if Michael quit his jobs frequently. It was hard, but my coworkers were all kind and I could enjoy working every day. A few years after I started working, Michael finally began to take his job seriously. Perhaps he found a workplace where he could settle down. That alone gave me some peace of mind. Simultaneously, I felt that Michael's mood was gradually improving. It was as if he had returned to the Michael I knew when we first got married. He began to show concern for me working full-time, asking, "Are you okay? Aren't you tired?" It was confusing because his personality had changed so much. But I thought maybe having a stable job gave him peace of mind, and I felt a bit relieved. Bella was growing up nice and healthy. By this time, Michael had become kinder to Bella and started playing with her as a father. Bella seemed to enjoy playing with Michael, which was heartwarming to see. However, I was still afraid to quit my job. Thus, I continued to rely on Elizabeth's help. "Bella, is she okay? Doesn't she feel lonely?"
Nope. She's really good.
As long as Bella was happy, that was all that mattered to me. I felt relieved and thought I should treat Elizabeth to a meal since I would continue to depend on her. A few more years passed, and Bella became a third grader, going to school happily every day. And our family relationship had improved, back to how it used to be. The times when Michael and I were at odds seemed like a distant memory. It was such a smooth period for us as a family. During this time, Michael made a suggestion. Should we consider buying a new car soon? A new car? Yeah, the one we have is okay, but I think it's time. You know, maintenance is getting tough, and there's the smog check coming up soon. Indeed, the car we were currently using was getting pretty old. Every time the smog check came around, the number of fixes seemed to increase, and the repair costs were becoming a concern. Indeed, maybe it's about time.
That's right. I thought you'd say that, so look, I got some catalogs.
Wow, already. Thank you. I was a bit taken aback that Michael was already set on buying a new car, but we looked through the catalogs together.
Bella, come here. Which car do you want to ride in?
Michael called Bella over, and eventually, the three of us were flipping through the catalogs. However, I had no idea that this action by Michael would lead to a tragedy. A few months later, we finally decided on a car, and it was delivered. It was a brand new car costing over $30,000. The car loan was in my name. Normally, it would be in Michael's name, but his job history was so unstable that I feared he wouldn't pass the credit check. I resolved to work even harder from now on to pay off the loan. I thought Michael felt the same. But my thoughts were completely off mark. Shockingly, Michael stopped coming home. He disappeared somewhere with the new car. Could Michael have been involved in some incident? While I was confused, I received a call. The caller ID showed it was from Michael.
Hello. Michael. Where are you now?
I was so worried that I raised my voice without thinking. Hey, don't shout like that. But, you suddenly disappeared, and the car is gone too. I was worried whether you ran away or got involved in some incident. I desperately explained how worried I was about Michael. But Michael laughed off my concerns and revealed shocking news. Actually, I've fallen in love with someone else. I love her more than you.
What? What do you mean?
Just what I said. I found someone I like more than you. I've filed for divorce, so don't bother me anymore. Divorce. This is too sudden. I didn't remember signing any divorce papers, but then I recalled writing them during a fight with Michael. Once signed, divorce papers indicate intent to divorce. I regretted writing them in the heat of the moment. Oh, and there's the matter of my debt. Kind of your problem now.
Debt? How much?
About $600,000? You take care of it, will you? Saying that, Michael hung up. Is this even possible? Was that smile he always showed me all a lie? As I thought this, all strength left me.
Mom, are you okay?
Bella gently rubbed my back as I sat slumped on the floor.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
I said I was fine, but of course, I was not. How am I supposed to live now, burdened with such a massive debt? $600,000 is just too much to pay off. And the car payments are in my name too. I quickly started searching for my ATM card. Shelves, cupboards, counter, locker. I searched everywhere I could think of, but it was nowhere to be found. My ATM card was anywhere to be seen. I opened the banking app on my smartphone. The balance was reduced. I had no memory of withdrawing any money. The only person who could have done this was Michael. I couldn't get through to Michael at all. It's no use. I was lost, feeling utterly defeated. But right now, I needed to focus on earning money. There was no time to dwell on my worries. So, I redirected my attention to work. I didn't want to worry Elizabeth, so I told her nothing. Of course, I didn't tell Bella either. A few weeks after Michael had run away, I lost consciousness at work. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. What?
Emily! Are you okay?
Ah, Elizabeth. Bella was there beside Elizabeth. It seemed I had collapsed due to excessive stress. Moreover, I was forced to stay in the hospital for a few days for thorough examinations. Hospitalized. Once you're discharged, we should talk about Michael. I've heard everything from Bella. From Bella. Did you know everything? Yeah. I actually heard the phone conversation with Dad. I couldn't believe Bella knew everything. I wondered if Elizabeth would scold me after being discharged, which made me a bit gloomy. The next day, the examinations began. Then, to my shock, they found cancer. It wasn't too advanced, so they said I could get much better after surgery, so I underwent the operation. Afterward, I was discharged, which was good, but I wasn't in a condition to work for a while. I had no savings, no income. And on top of that, I needed to pay for the surgery and hospitalization costs. During this time, Elizabeth and Bella were the ones who helped me. Bella had detailed to Elizabeth about my situation and what Michael had done. Hearing this, Elizabeth was furious. She wanted to find Michael and make him pay for the debt and alimony. However, Michael's whereabouts were unknown. We don't know where Michael is. How can we claim anything? Then, Elizabeth had a suggestion. Michael had the car registered under your name, right? Since you're the legal owner, why not take it back first? Can we do that? When I expressed my doubt, Elizabeth revealed something surprising. Actually, I found out where Michael works. It seemed that Michael was working at a company in the same building as Elizabeth. Elizabeth mostly worked remotely, but she said she saw him occasionally when she went to the office. If that was the case, then we should go to Michael right now. I was ready to confront him immediately. If we left him alone, he might disappear somewhere. However, Elizabeth stopped me. It's reckless to go without a plan. I have a good idea. Well, not just me, but Bella and I. Right. Plan. Elizabeth and Bella exchanged looks. I had no idea what they were planning. While I was staring blankly, Bella smiled broadly and said, "Don't worry, we've got it covered." What were they plotting? Even when I tried to find out, they wouldn't tell me. However, a month later, I found out what Elizabeth and Bella had done. While at Elizabeth's house, a call came in. Looking at the caller ID, it was Michael. I ignored the call once, but he kept calling persistently. Wondering what he wanted, I hesitantly answered, and Michael screamed in panic.
Help me!
What are you talking about?
Just come quickly! I'm going to get arrested by the police if it stays like this.
Michael then told me his current location before hanging up. Elizabeth and Bella, who had overheard the conversation, finally revealed their plan. Actually, we had filed a stolen vehicle report. And it was Bella's idea. Isn't that great? Bella blushed shyly. I thanked Elizabeth and Bella and headed to Michael's location. It was a park relatively close to our house. Michael was surrounded by police officers. He is likely being questioned. We went to where Michael was. We explained the situation to the officers, convincing them to leave. Afterward, Michael led us into the car and started talking. Inside, a strong-willed-looking woman sat in the passenger seat. She was glaring at us. "Man, I'm glad you came. But why did the police come to me?" Michael seemed clueless, making me sigh. "Because I've filed a stolen vehicle report. The car is mine, after all." Huh? We're already divorced. Now, Michael is essentially driving around in a car that belongs to someone else. It's only natural that a theft report was filed. He probably never imagined such a scenario. Bella then confronted Michael, piling on the pressure.
Why did you leave us, Dad? Why did you leave us with all that debt? Why?
Michael sighed wearily. But he said nothing.
Planning to stay silent? If so, I can have you arrested. You know you've committed a crime by using my name without permission, right?
With that, Michael started to open up bit by bit. The woman's name is Linda Carter. Michael had started working at a new company where Linda had recently been hired. They got to know each other at a welcome party and subsequently entered into a relationship. About 3 months ago, Linda became pregnant with his child. Indeed, Linda's belly was noticeably rounded.
So, you abandoned us for her.
Abandoned is such a harsh word. But it's true that you left us. Suddenly, Elizabeth jumped into the conversation, causing Michael to look bewildered. Watching this unfold, Elizabeth pushed forward. Then, Elizabeth started lecturing Michael about his past actions. Saddling me with his debt, his attitude towards his family, quitting jobs frequently, and his quick temper. It was unclear whether Michael was feeling remorseful or not as he kept his head down in silence. Linda seemed irritated by Michael's silence. I also asked about the reason for the debt, but he wouldn't say anything. Impatient with the silence, Linda blurted out a shocking truth. He took out loans in your name to buy me loads of designer goods. It was really the best. The result of Michael buying things for Linda was a debt of $600,000. What could he have possibly bought? From the looks of it, he must have purchased several items worth millions of yen each. It was utterly ridiculous. However, what caught my attention was Linda revealing the reason for the debt. If she was in on it with Michael, divulging this would put her at a disadvantage. As I pondered this, Bella asked Linda a question. "Hey, your belly is pretty big. Is it a baby? When is it due?" "In about 3 more months, I guess." "Due in 3 months? But that doesn't add up. If she got pregnant 3 months ago, there's still a long way to go until the birth." Elizabeth seemed to have thought the same, pressing Linda further. "Is that child really Michael's? It can't be, right? It's impossible for the baby to be born in 3 months. Whose child is it?" Elizabeth was direct and to the point, much to my surprise. Linda appeared ready to spill everything. "Yeah, it's not Michael's child. I thought about hiding it, but it seemed like more trouble than it was worth, so I just let it out." "You revealed the debt issue too?" "Yes, I guess Michael, you are of no use to me anymore," she said with a vulgar laugh. Being in this hellish situation made me feel sick. Michael looked at Linda incredulously, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing.
"What do you mean by that?"
"Just what I said." As Michael and Linda started arguing, the already dreadful atmosphere got even worse. But Elizabeth broke the tension. "We'll call the police now."
"What? Why?" "You both don't seem to listen, and seem to forget, using Emily's name for loans is a crime. Plus, driving around a car without permission. After all, Emily and Michael are strangers now."
With that, Elizabeth instructed me to call the police. Despite Michael and Linda's frantic attempts to stop me, I continued with the call. Soon, the flashing lights of a police car appeared. This was the moment to finally hold them accountable. For the debts and the car, everything needed to be settled. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Following these events, Michael and Linda faced legal repercussions. They didn't end up in prison but were ordered to pay me compensation for damages, cover the debt, and provide child support. Despite their pleas through lawyers for a reduction, the final judgment was not in their favor, especially since Bella had recorded their conversation in the car, which served as evidence. I wondered why Bella had recorded them. Upon asking, she mentioned that she got the idea from a drama she was watching with Elizabeth, where a conversation was secretly recorded. I couldn't help but admire Bella's smart thinking, while also wondering what kind of dramas Elizabeth was showing her. Now, Bella and I were staying with Elizabeth. Our homes weren't far apart, so Bella's schooling was unaffected. Thankfully, the car was returned, and Michael was dealing with the debt. If only Michael hadn't made such reckless decisions, he wouldn't have found himself in this debt crisis. Without a doubt, none of this would have been possible without Elizabeth and Bella.
I'm resolved to work hard every day, living happily with the two of them.